July 10th, and we're certainly pleased to have everybody here. Before we go to the roll call, I would like to give a special welcome to the South Dakota Municipal Clerks Institute. We actually have 21 clerks from around our great state, as far as Rapid City, that have taken the time to come to Sioux Falls this week to learn more about how we do things in Sioux Falls, and we certainly are very, very pleased to have them here. If we wouldn't mind, let's recognize them at least to start this meeting off and welcome them to Sioux Falls with a hearty, hearty hello. Thanks, everybody. We appreciate that. Let's move on to our meeting with the roll call of your city council.
Councilors Aguilar? Here. Anderson?
Here.
Entman?
Here.
Erpenbach? Here. Jamison?
Here.
Karski?
Here.
Rolfing?
Here.
Staggers?
Present.
As is normally the case, all 8 councilors are here representing all of you, Sioux Falls. It's great. We start every meeting with a prayer and an invocation, and tonight we're very, very pleased to have Pastor Reed DeVries of Celebrate Community Church. For those of you who are not familiar with Celebrate, it is one of the largest churches in our city, if not the largest, with over 5,000 folks attending on a regular basis, located at 18th and Sycamore, and we're very, very pleased to have Pastor Reed here tonight. After he starts us with an invocation, we'd ask you to remain standing for our Pledge of Allegiance. Pastor Reed, welcome.
Well, let's pray. Well, Heavenly Father, we are just overwhelmed with gratitude as we come here tonight. Obviously, what a spectacular day you've given us. And just a week ago, we celebrated Independence Day, and we realized the freedoms that we have in this country, and yet we realize each of those freedoms came with a price. And so we thank you for the men and women who have sacrificed their lives in times before that we would have this freedom, and we would have democracy, and we would have the ability to meet like this tonight. And so, Lord, now we thank you for Sioux Falls. We thank you for the men and women who for years have labored and poured into the city in so many different ways and made it such a great place to live. And we thank you for our elected officials here who are represented tonight and for the wisdom that they bring. Lord, we ask that as they discuss matters, you would give them great wisdom in all affairs, great understanding, and always knowing to do what's right. Lord, we pray for the many people who watch our city through the police force and fire department, through doctors, nurses, and all other things that are represented, that you would protect them as well. So, Lord, we just offer ourselves to you. We ask that you would bless this night and bless our city, and let it be a beacon of hope and a light to those around. We ask this in your name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great way to start. We will continue with this meeting with our consent agenda. Council, any changes or comments on tonight's consent agenda?
Move approval, Aguilar.
Second, Anderson.
Councilor Aguilar has made a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda. It was seconded by Councilor Anderson, Jr. If there is no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman?
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 8-0. We'll now move on to tonight's regular agenda. Council, any changes to tonight's regular agenda?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Anderson, Jr. has made a motion to approve tonight's regular agenda. It was seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. Is there any discussion on that? Very good. A roll call vote, please.
Okay. Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman?
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 8-0. We'll now move on to a portion that the council truly appreciates, and that's an opportunity for the public to engage them. If anybody would like to come forward and speak to the council, please do so. Just introduce yourself And if you would limit your comments to 5 minutes or less, the council would appreciate that. If it's an item that's going to come up later on in the agenda, and there's a lot that we're going to cover tonight, we'd ask you to keep your comments to that particular agenda item. So again, welcome. Is there anybody who wanted to speak to the council tonight? Well, very good. Thank you. We'll now move on to item number 13.
Deferred from the meeting of June 19th, 2012, a second reading and ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending Chapters 10 and 40 of the revised ordinances of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota by amending on-street bicycle ordinances.
Sam Trebelcock, City of Sioux Falls Planning Office. I gave an informational a couple weeks ago to you. I did want to go through a little bit of a summary to give you kind of refresh everybody's memory what we're doing, and then some of the things that we are also suggesting we change, and maybe some more information too. But it's just kind of a quick summary. Now I'm trying to remember how to use this. Just a little bit of a background. The Bicycle Committee put this information together for you, and it's important that we share the road, and we wanted to make sure that you understood that the Bicycle Committee took a look at this information as a part of updates to on-street bicycle ordinances. In 2011, the Bicycle Committee worked to put together a bicycle education safety course to teach police and officers, city staff, and the citizens about Sioux Falls bicycle laws. The finding was that current city bicycle ordinances are not clear and not up to date. So we thought it was important to move forward and clarify those ordinances. So in late 2011 and 2012, the Bicycle Committee came forward with some bicycle ordinances to clarify and update that. First of all, I'm not going to go through all this because we did the last time. Where do I ride in the street? What we're proposing is two distinct situations to clarify now. One is in which the bicycle shares the lane with the motor vehicle when there's enough room in that lane. The second is when they may take the lane when there's not enough room in the same lane as the motor vehicle. So that's one thing that we're looking to do. Second is, how much room should I give the bicycle safely to pass? Right now, current law says that you have to provide a safe passing distance, the motorist must. We're defining that as 3 feet. So they must look at the 3-foot rule, which is pretty common around the country. Where do I ride on a one-way road with 2 or more lanes? You'll see this. There's sharrows right now on Dakota Avenue and also Main Avenue. They're on the left side. Actually, that's not legal, officially not legal. So when it's on the left side of the street, we're allowing for people to be able to ride as far to the left as possible also. Thanks, Jeff. Go ahead. Also, bicycle lanes and right turn lanes. As this picture suggests here, in some situations it's not legal right now to have a shared right turn lane and along with a bicycle lane. So we're going to allow that possibility when it is needed. This next one, what happens when the signal won't change when I'm on a bicycle? Last time we had some discussion about this item. We're suggesting that this item, because to make it consistent with the way that motorcycles are treated, that this be amended out of the ordinance, and I think that will be something that we look at later on here to do. There'll be a motion to that, as I understand. And the Bicycle Committee looked at this in between, and they were supportive of that amendment. Can two bicycles ride side by side within the same lane? We're suggesting that we update current city ordinance to allow bicycles to ride side by side. There's actually quite a bit of discussion of this one. I did some research. Actually, 47 states around the country do allow side-by-side bicycle riding. The Uniform Traffic Code does allow at least or up to two people to ride side-by-side in the same lane. So we think it's important that we update it to for Sioux Falls also to look at that. And also one more. We're adding the alternate right turn lane that's circled there on the picture there, which is being able to signal with your right-hand turn, which for a lot of people makes sense when you're riding a bicycle to be able to signal that. So we're making that change. With that, I would take any questions you have. I do know that there's a fair number of people that are interested in addressing the council, though, too.
Sam, thank you. We appreciate that. Folks, this is a second reading, and you do have an opportunity to engage the council. What we'd like to do is invite you up to engage the council. Again, we'd ask you to just introduce yourself and limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Would anybody like to speak to this item? Please come forward.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, councils. I'm Michael Christensen. And first, I apologize. I have 6 minutes of material for you. So if you stop me at 5 minutes, I'm going to beg for more. I have served a year as the president of the Sioux Empire Bicycle Club. I have served a term on the first board of the Falls Area Bicyclists. I helped found and continue to serve on the board of the Falls Area Single Track, the group that brought you dirt trails to Leaders Park. I helped found and continue to serve on the board of the South Dakota Bicycle Coalition. I am in my 4th or 5th year as a member of CCOG's MPO Citizens Advisory Committee. You members of the Urbanized Development Commission may remember this winter viewing a video of mine describing how to safely navigate West 12th Street and Interstate 29 interchange on a bicycle. Most importantly, I'm certified by the League of American Bicyclists to teach their smart cycling curriculum. Mayor, a few years ago, I was the League of American Bicyclists representative that handed your predecessor the Sioux Falls Bronze Level Bicycle Friendly Community Award. Let me summarize the 3 most important existing laws related to operating bicycles on the roadway. First, the definition of vehicle includes bicycle. In 1994, the South Dakota Supreme Court adjudicated a case between 2 Sioux Falls cyclists that had collided head-on in the middle of Tomar Road. An important part of the case was whether that law requires 2 vehicles to yield half the part. In 1994, the South Dakota Supreme Court adjudicated a case between 2 Sioux Falls cyclists that had collided head-on in the middle of Tomar Road. An important part of the case was whether the law that requires 2 vehicles to yield half the roadway to each other when traveling in opposite directions applies to bicycles. The court unanimously agreed that according to South Dakota law, bicycles are considered vehicles, therefore the law applied. This is current law. Bicycles are vehicles in South Dakota. Therefore, every law that describes how one vehicle should respond to another in the roadway also describes how drivers of motorized vehicles should respond to those of us on bicycles. A second existing law gives every person driving a bicycle all of the rights and duties of any driver of any other vehicle. You may have heard people suggest that bicycles don't belong on roadways. This suggestion is birthed in ignorance of current law. The third law is so long and painful to read that most people think it says bicycles must be ridden as far to the right as possible. It doesn't say that. It really says that bicycles are to be ridden as far to the right as practicable, except when overtaking another vehicle, preparing for a left turn, avoiding objects, vehicles, bicycles, pedestrians, animals, hazards, and when the lane is too narrow to safely share with another bicycle. Let me repeat that. I should ride as far to the right as practicable, except when the lane is too narrow to safely share. The most common lane widths in Sioux Falls are 10 and 12 feet. You can do simple math to determine when a lane is too narrow to safely share. Cars are 7 to 8 feet wide. A rider is 2 to 3 feet wide. Throw in some space for safety buffer, and you can really see that most lanes in the city are measurably too narrow to safely share. A few weeks ago, Roger Elgersma stood here in front of you and said, "There are certain times I pull out into the middle of the lane just so that I'm safe from people accidentally hitting me." Roger is fully legal and fully correct that this is often the safest way to ride. You may have heard drivers say, "The bicycle came out of nowhere. I almost or did hit him." Nowhere exists. It is every place that a driver either can't see or doesn't look. You never hear anybody say, "The bicycle came out of somewhere. I almost hit him." Somewhere is a place a driver can see and is looking, usually in the driving lane. Sometimes it's the face of a cell phone. Any frustration you've heard about bicycles taking up the whole lane, making it impossible to pass, comes from ignorance of this law. There are lanes in the city that are too narrow for a bicycle to safely share with a motor vehicle. In those lanes, it is acceptable, even imperative, for a bicyclist to move left and ride in the whole lane. These three laws are the existing reality of what is provided to bicycle riders on the roadway. Far too few people know this, and even fewer understand it. Your planning department and the bicycle committee wants to revise some of these laws. I've reviewed all of them, and I support all of the changes. I ask that you read them into law tonight. You should read into law that a bicycle may use the full lane as an indication to drivers that the lane is not wide enough to safely share. You're not changing what already exists in law. You're just stating clearly to a reader that there is good reason for a rider to make full use of the lane. You should read into law that an overtaking vehicle must give 3 feet to the side of an overtaken bicycle. Do this to help protect your bicycle-riding citizens, but also do it to put drivers at ease. A semi-truck driver wrote in the Argus Leader that currently he squeezes his truck between the rider and the lane line and hopes nothing bad happens to the rider. This law will make it clear to drivers that this passing behavior is inappropriate. Finally, you should read into law that bicycles may ride two abreast unless a vehicle is approaching from behind. We're social beings. Let us talk. Let us communicate. I have with me a 90-second news report from Pettigrew Heights that shows your bicycle-riding police officers don't follow this law as it's currently written. The video also shows them riding through a stop sign, so if you need someone to train them, I know a guy. Thanks for the time you've put into learning about bicycling in Sioux Falls. Please accept all of these revisions and read them into law today. Thank you for the extra time.
Michael, good job. Thank you. Folks, anybody else want to engage the council? Welcome.
Thank you, Council Mayor. My name is Harold Christensen. I brought some comments. Thank you for your attention to these bicycle revisions. This process started 20 months ago. Specifically, you were asked to help reconcile the disparate understanding of traffic laws regarding motor vehicles and bicycles. There is misunderstanding between Sioux Falls Police, state's attorneys, motor vehicle operators, and League of American Bicyclists and their bicycle safety instruction. This whole exercise is about being informed. There has been a lot of sharing of information and a lot of progress. Your staff, city planning, city attorneys, police have spent hours and hours, not without frustration. The planning department's bicycle committee has spent hours and hours. Thanks also to you for being informed. As I stand here, I presume you have been paying attention. I presume you have learned new things about the tensions between bicycles and automobiles. I presume you've heard from your staff and your transportation experts. I presume you have channels and have talked with other cities and have learned how to make progress. And of course, you have the large view of the needs of our city. Thank you for that. The opportunities to be informed have been large this month, and your experts have said these revisions are good. If you have not used this time to become informed and learn new things, then you are not ready for this vote. If you are voting based on old information, personally observed from the seat of your car, you have missed what we're doing. If that's the case, make a motion to give yourself more time. Bicycles are here and they're growing. There are very good reasons for their growth. In our fast-paced world with high energy costs, It builds community to slow down, meet your neighbors eye to eye, and see things you can't see at more than 20 miles an hour. Bicycles are the most commonly used mode of transportation around the world, and they have been for generations. The current issue of Time magazine, believe it or not, it's dated July 16th, next Monday. There's an article on page 52 titled, "Biking is on the rise, but is there room on the road for everyone?" We don't want to be like New York City. They are not our model. They want to be like us. Hear what Time magazine says about New York's congestion. One way to relieve some of that congestion while improving public health and cutting greenhouse gas emissions is to take people out of cars and put them into bikes. I am telling you, more people would ride bicycles if they felt safe. Tonight, you vote on revised laws. Here's a zero cost with a huge impact. When are you ever offered a deal like that? Support this law.
Harold, thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to the council tonight? Well, very good. Thank you very much, Michael and Harold. We appreciate it. Council, I now defer to you. Any questions, comments on this topic? Councilor Entman.
Mr. Mayor, I will be making a motion for an amendment, and effectively it is dealing with the affirmative defense relating to unchanging traffic control signals. I think the statement was made here earlier that the Supreme Court, South Dakota Supreme Court that is, looks at bicycles as vehicles by South Dakota state law. And by South Dakota law, a motor vehicle cannot go through a red light because the red light does not change. Case in point, we have three different, my understanding with talking about with traffic control, we have three different types of turn signals or stoplights in the city of Sioux Falls, and almost all of them do not react to motorcycles. Motorcycles are a prime example, and we have tried a couple of different times to pass a state law dealing specifically with motorcycles that allows a motorcycle, after the light is cycled through once or twice, very similar to law in Minnesota, to allow us to go through a red light, to turn on a red light. And we have not been successful at that. So I will be proposing this. I do believe in this ordinance. Bicycles have been here since, believe it or not, before my time, as was stated earlier. And I think they are on the road, and I think that this is a good ordinance. Thank you.
Councilor Ribbenbach.
I'm assuming, Mr. Mayor, that you've not made that motion to amend yet, so we're discussing the existing. Thank you. My question then for Sam, if I could.
Sam.
Sam, just basic, and we're talking about this bicycle committee, and I see lots of folks here that I assume are bicyclists, but talk to me about the bicycle committee. Who are those folks, and how do we work them into the way that this ordinance was written for us?
Whether the bicycle committee came out of a committee in which a stakeholder committee in forming our bicycle plan. And they continue to be kind of a sounding board for many of the things that we move forward through the city. They give us a lot of information about what they think about trail closures and alternate routes and also ordinance changes and a lot of things that we're trying to do in terms of implementing that bicycle plan. Really, it's a stakeholder group that if somebody asks if can they be on the bicycle committee, I put them on the email list, and so it's an email list right now is what it is. Anybody that's interested in serving on that. So it's a stakeholder group.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Mm-hmm. Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, Sam, my primary concern with the ordinance is that the punishment. I know it refers to another part of city code, but I can't remember the exact punishment, the maximum punishment for a violation of this.
Yeah, well, it's the general traffic law, and I think we said last time, if I remember right, it was 200? 300? 300 for each offense, like any other traffic offense
and
would
or
be.
30 days in jail?
David, would you mind clarifying that? David, would you mind just clarifying that?
Thank you, Mayor. It'd be $200 or 30 days in jail or both.
Yeah. I guess that's really the primary concern I have about this ordinance. It's just, when you it's too extreme when it comes to punishment, if the maximum punishment would be used. I agree with the people that were saying, hey, this ordinance should be for education, but it's not just education. You have a severe penalty here involved. And I was just wondering, what do you think about the possibility of continuing to have this to be an education ordinance, with the only punishment being that we would write warning tickets? And then if there's any severe violations of vehicle law, state law, then we would use that law to punish people.
Well, I think what we're looking at right now and talking to the police and attorneys about it is, in a lot of cases, we'd like to see at least warnings being issued. In a lot of cases, that's not even occurring now. And that's where this kind of started with, was we were looking to go through a training session with the police and attorneys on the current bicycle laws, and it was hard to interpret. So with these laws in place, then we'd like to go back to the police and attorneys and sit down and get into that training so that we can get to that enforcement aspect.
Yeah, if I could just briefly say something.
Sure.
As I'm sitting here thinking about this, I might introduce an amendment just saying we would only write warning tickets to enforce this ordinance. And then the idea being we would rely on the regular vehicle motor ordinances for the real punishment. So I might propose that if somebody wants to think about it too.
Yes, Councilor Rolfing.
I might interject for Councilor Staggers. Are you thinking of the vehicle, the motor vehicle, the car drivers, or are you thinking
the vehicle
for the
law, which covers bicycles?
Okay,
the
so
state, yes.
Are you planning on issuing a warning ticket to the bicyclist or to the car
whoever
that comes within 1 feet and almost knocks somebody down?
Whoever would get a warning ticket. So this is purely educational.
Okay.
But once again, if they almost hit somebody, they might be involved in reckless driving, and that would be covered under vehicle laws.
What do you do, if I may, Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Rolfing.
What do you do with the bicyclist who pulls right out in front of the car and causes an accident that way?
That's under vehicle law.
But
the state vehicle law, yes, reckless driving.
For the bicyclist?
Yeah, so they would, both motorists and bicyclists would be covered by the vehicle law of the state, which once again covers both bicycles and motor vehicles. And this would be purely educational.
Very good. Yes, Councilor.
My question, and I don't know who to direct it to, is when we talk about vehicle, are bicycles under the same statutes as motor vehicles?
And you'll see that it's kind of interwoven in amongst the vehicle laws that we have. So I do think that would be difficult to do, just thinking about it off right now. And, I'm sure that, attorneys might have an opinion on that too, but.
Keith, would you mind coming forward, please? We'd appreciate that. Keith, if you just introduce yourself to the people of our town, we'd appreciate it. And if you could help address that topic, we'd really appreciate it.
Thank you. Keith Allenstein, Assistant City Attorney. The problem with that proposal is that, as Sam was just trying to start to explain, vehicles include bicycles, and for the most part, all the same rules apply. And so there are some rules that can't apply, like you don't have to have blinkers or lights and things like that for certain things, but to try to separate out and say you're only going to issue warnings, it wouldn't really work, because our city ordinances include traffic laws, which apply equally to vehicles and to bikes. So, I mean, I just don't know how that would work.
Well, if I could respond, Mr. Mayor.
Councilor.
The idea be that we have this bicycle ordinance. It's just purely educational. And it's separate from the vehicle ordinance, which Michael Christensen said the vehicle ordinances include bicycles. Vehicle equals bicycle. So if we have some real bad violations, we just use the vehicle law. If we want to focus on the education, then we use the bicycle ordinance.
Okay, but this is being deemed a bicycle ordinance. But if you look, it's 40-1, 40-77. 40-83. These are
Sure.
all just the traffic codes that apply to all vehicles. So this isn't really a bicycle ordinance, it's a traffic ordinance, and we're changing and incorporating certain and explaining and clarifying certain things as they apply to bicycles. But these are the general traffic rules for the City of Sioux Falls for all vehicles. So this isn't a separate bicycle ordinance. The only one that's in a separate bicycle ordinance is section 10-38, and why that one's separated out. It has been, it's part of history, and that's where two bicycles can ride abreast. But the rest of them are just under the general traffic regulations.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Council, maybe in the purposes of getting this going or not going, is there anybody on the council who'd like to make a motion to approve this?
So moved, Erpenbach.
Second, Rolfing.
Councilor Erbenbach has made a motion to approve item number 13. It was seconded by Councilor Rolfing. Is there any further conversation on this? Yes, Councilor Entenmann.
Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a motion to amend the main motion by removing section 40-11 6.1, affirmative defense relating to unchanging traffic control signal.
Is there a second?
Second that, Rolfing.
Councilor Entenmann has made a motion to amend this item. It was seconded by Councilor Rolfing. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilor Erbenbach.
I have been against this, but now, Keith, can I ask you about Mr. Christensen talking about the Supreme Court ruling that it is a vehicle? Can you verify that?
Keith and Sam, will you guys stay close?
I just think, because for me, I think a bicycle is different, but if it really is by Supreme Court, it's in state law that it is a vehicle, the same as a motorcycle, the same as anything else. Can you verify that?
Generally, so under our city ordinances and under state statute even, the definition of vehicle includes bicycles. It doesn't include motor vehicles, obviously, because it doesn't have a motor. So there are some, but generally in state statute, whether Supreme Court decision or not, in state statute it's defined, bicycles are generally defined as vehicles for most purposes. Now, basically the way the statutes and other places explains it says they're deemed a vehicle and all the rules apply except those which make no sense to it, so like what I said, like the lights and the blinkers and tail lights, stuff like that.
Right, thank you.
Councilor Entenmann.
Mr. Mayor, if I can make another comment, and I only speak from that on two-wheeled powered vehicles, motorcycles. A lot of the laws that we're addressing here specifically that they want to really clean up actually are laws that are already we motorcyclists look at. For example, taking the left-hand lane. You don't ride down the center because that's where all the oil and scrap comes from a car. You either ride in the right-hand lane or the left-hand lane. It's all a case about being visible to the vehicles that are coming. Even riding a motorcycle, when you're riding on the right-hand side by yourself, cars have a tendency to cut you off. They try to pass you in the same lane, which is illegal. Okay? Same way if you're trying to turn in your right-hand lane. You're trying to make a right-hand turn. It's not unusual for a car to take and cut off a motorcyclist the same way. These laws make sense. After leaving a council meeting when this was brought up one time, I was paying attention to a motorcyclist. He was riding in the right-hand lane. The right-hand side, right up next to the cars. When he came to the intersection, the lane actually narrowed. He pulled out in the full lane so the cars could see him. And he went straight. The car behind him actually made a right-hand turn. And it's very possible that that car would have turned into that bicyclist if he had not pulled out into the center lane. So I believe what we're just really trying to do here is define the laws, is to add a little bit of clarity to them. And I do encourage all of us to take and support this.
Councilor Rolfing.
Could I ask Councilman Entenmann to explain exactly what the amendment does as he understands it?
Yeah, the amendment, the way that the law was proposed originally, the way I understand it, if you sit at a stoplight and if the stoplight does not turn, it allows the bicyclist to ride through a red light. Okay? And law does not allow motor vehicles to ride through a red light because it does not cycle through. So we're removing that section from the law.
So that the vehicle, the motorcyclist or the bicyclist would not be able to go through a red light.
That's
even
correct.
If it does not cycle through.
We're taking that section out of the proposed ordinance.
Well, Council, great job. We do have an amendment that has been made or offered for your consideration. If we could have a roll call vote on that amendment, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. We now have an amended main motion. Council, any further discussion on this item? Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, I'm going to be voting for it, but my main trepidation is in regard to the penalty issue.
Yes. Very good, Council. If we can have a roll call vote on the amended main motion.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 14.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, approving the release of the permanent utility easements in lots 10A and 11A, Block 9, Westwood Valley Addition, to the City of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, South Dakota.
Good evening, Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division of Public Works. It appears that that item number up there is incorrect. I believe we're on item 14. Is that?
Yes.
All right. These permanent utility easements are located in the Westwood Valley Addition, which is west of 32nd Street and Ellis Road. There are no utilities in the easements, and staff recommends the release.
Thank you, Chad. This is a second reading. Is there anyone who wanted to speak to this item? Council?
Move to approve, Intiman.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Emmons made a motion to approve item 14, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. If there is no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson? Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 15.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, approving the release of the permanent utility easements in lots 10A and 11A and lots 3, 4, and 18, Block 9, Westwood Valley Addition, to the City of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, South Dakota.
Jen.
These permanent utility easements are also located in the Westwood Valley Addition near 32nd and Ellis Road. You'll notice this ordinance also includes the easements that were released in item 14, and that is because the easements were granted by two separate owners on two separate plats, and thus must be released from each plat, which this item will do. There are no utilities in these easements, and staff recommends the release.
Thank you, Chad. Another second reading. Would anybody like to speak to this item? Council?
Move to approve, Anderson.
Second, Karski.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve item 15, seconded by Councilor Karski. If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes.
And that is passed 8-0. Item 16.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the revised ordinances of the city by amending the schedule of rates to be charged by the City Light and Power Department for furnishing electric current for light and power purposes as found in Chapter 41, Utilities.
Welcome, Mark.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Mark Cotter with the Office of Public Works. And the first utility that we'll speak to tonight builds off the comprehensive presentation that we provided back on June 19th at the informational meeting and last Tuesday that we provided at the first reading. It is for light and power rates. The cost of service approach allows us to analyze our expenses and offer to you the minimum rate review and increase if needed. And for this utility, we're recommending a 3% rate increase across all customer classes. And we're here to answer your questions.
Folks, again, a second reading. Is there anyone who wanted to speak to this item from the public? Welcome, Mr. Stenga.
Tim Stenga. I guess I'm going to speak for all these instead of coming up 4 times.
Thank you, Mr. Stenga.
I know you don't want to listen to me 4 times. I'm going to speak for not only myself since I'm on electric, but I'm going to speak for all the elderly people that are on this electric and all the people that are going to get stuck with the water bill sewage bill, and the garbage bills. There's a lot of people out there that are struggling in this town. Not only elderly people, there's a lot of people that are that don't have jobs, that are just trying to pay their taxes on their houses. I guess my question is, we always talk about being prudent, and I'm not knocking that. But this city, I bet you 3/4 of their workers, they don't know where they're at during the day. And I think until the city can come up and put the rate hikes on all the citizens of Sioux Falls, electric, water, sewer, and the garbage, to be able to find out where their employees are at during the day, all the time. 3/4 of the budget, as I'm just speculating, is fuel. If we got people driving around this town that are sitting at Get and Go, sitting at any other place, Burger King, what name it, why are they there? And I'm looking at it and saying, it's time that the city realizes that there's a lot of people out there that are taking advantage of their jobs. And I'm recommending that we put GPS on all vehicles so we know where all city employees are at. And that way, if, and me and Mark have talked about this, that if somebody needs their water turned off or turned on, they can look on the computer and say, okay, so-and-so is 2 blocks away. We'll call him. He can go ahead and turn it on or off. That's being prudent. And I watch it every day. All you got to do is drive around town and you see a city vehicle sitting someplace where it's not supposed to be. And with a GPS on it, the person that is supposed to be in charge of that vehicle or the person driving that vehicle should be able to punch it up on a computer and to be able to see why that person is where they are, where they're not supposed to be. So, thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Stinga. Folks, is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this item? Well, very good. Council, I know, put it in your hands. Councilor Staggers.
Yes, if I could ask questions of Mark. I guess one of the primary concerns I have about this, besides what Mr. Stanga said about raising rates on people who might have low income or whatever the case, senior citizens, is we're also going to charge city facilities more. So consequently, we're going to charge more for the water plant, which is the largest producer of electricity, and then all of us as citizens of Sioux Falls will indirectly be paying for this increase. Could you maybe respond to how much more money we're going to be paying to the citizens are going to be paying for this electric bill to operate the water plant?
Well, there's the water plant's a customer class just like all the other customer class in this utility, and they will also see a 3% rate increase on their usage. And so 3% on their line item for electric use will be for the water plant as well.
And how much is that?
I can see if we can provide that to you. I'm going to have to get that for you, Councilor Staggers.
But that's a concern.
Those are line item budgets.
Yes. But that's a concern I have. We're indirectly paying for this. And most of these are government facilities, so the city taxpayers will be paying for this electric increase. But also, too, you have some new priority projects. For example, the distribution circuit at $380,000. That's primarily going to the new event center. Am I to assume that the $380,000 is not part of the $115 million cost of the event center?
It's not, and that's customary with any redevelopment that comes when a new customer gets set with an electric utility. Very common with the uptown development, with all those buildings coming online. This utility also brings them power direct, sets a transformer, and so we take that same philosophy, whether it's for that event center, that entire complex. That circuit also will provide redundancy to that entire area because we have a number of customers in that area. And so just following through on that same philosophy.
But we are subsidizing the event center by doing this. because we have developers, private developers, when they go out and develop in streets and do all that, they pay for it. And here we are subsidizing this.
On this case, just like for development of Uptown or any other new customer in this service territory, it's the same approach. If they are building a new building, we get them power, we set them a new transformer, and they take it from the transformer into their facility. So it's no different than any other customer.
Okay. What kind of reserve are we going to have with this rate increase? Anticipated reserve?
We've got our 90-day reserve that's set. And let me get my... We'll pull up the slide from the comprehensive approach. All right, again, we have a graph that provides a lot of information that we've talked in great detail for. Let me just step you through what this graph tells you. The red is the estimated operating reserves as we path through the various years. There's a break between 11 and 12. So at 11 today, we're right at our target operating reserve. Next year in 13, we're using a portion of those reserves, and so we'll fall just below the target. And then in 14 and 15 and 16, we'll start to build up those cash reserves to ultimately get ready for that large conversion project when we go from 69 kV up to 115. So it's a process here that you'll see that we don't take when we look at these utilities, we don't take a look at the static year that we're just recommending the rate review for. In many cases, we'll show you at least 5 years with the water and wastewater utilities. With the intensity of the capital needs, we often look out as far as 20 years just to make sure that we can deliver the smoothest rates to the customers.
So if I'm reading this correct, Mark, for 2012, we're estimating, what, $2.3 million? Is that pure reserves then?
Well, it's essentially it's cash in the bank so they can not only operate the utility, but it is reserves. So if something were to happen that's unforeseen, this utility has dollars in the bank to make those repairs and then move forward.
Okay, fine. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councilor Aguilar.
Mark, a few weeks ago, the council received an email from Xcel Energy about their proposed rate hikes. I don't recall exactly what that percentage was. Do you happen to know?
I know we have, we're a customer as well of Xcel in certain facilities, and they were varying. I want to say on average it was 11%, but different customer classes. Greg, do you recall what your facility will see?
Greg Anderson, Water Superintendent, Public Works Water Purification. 3% from City Power would be close to $35,000 a year. From Xcel, we're looking anywhere from 8 to 11%, depending on the customer class. Sioux Valley Energy just came and gave us our new rate for this year and next, and it's a 9% increase from Sioux Valley Energy.
Council, would anybody like to make a motion to approve this item?
Mayor, could I
Yes.
ask one more
Councilor
question?
Aguilar, please do so. My apologies.
Mark, would you comment on Mr. Stanga's concerns regarding city employees and the GPS?
Certainly. Well, as we manage employees, whether it's on the public side or the private side, you have a management structure. There's a lead that's responsible for those employees. They have work orders to carry out and ultimately get the work done. We have used GPS when we tested snow gates. They're an effective tool, and fleets across the country are starting to use them, not only on the private side but the public side. The one comment that I shared with Mr. Stanga was probably our first year-round application that we'll use is with the new billing software with water and wastewater. And it will just help us as we manage the different zones of the city. If a commercial plumber calls in for a shutoff, we can clearly, quickly pull up a screen, find the closest tech, and distribute them out to there, and actually offer timed service. So we can tell that respective customer that we'll be there between 9 and 9:15. The reason we've waited to roll that out is we just have this new billing software that's gone online in the recent, and that's the next module. So we have it in our budget to test it, ultimately implement it, and then if it's successful, we'll continue to work through that system. So we believe in it as well. There's a cost because you uplink that to either like a cell phone technology to ultimately manage those pieces on a screen. I don't disagree, and so when we can leverage new technology to be more efficient, we will.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilor Enneman.
Move to approve Entenmann.
Thank you, Councilor Enneman.
Second, Aguilar.
Thank you, Councilor Aguilar. There's been a motion to approve, and it has been seconded. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Staggers.
Yes. What I'd like to do is, like Mr. Stanga, make just some brief remarks about this and the other ordinances, because we're going to be talking about 4 city business enterprises. But it's important to keep in mind that while we call them business enterprises, they're not regular businesses like we have in the private sector. What I'm referring to is that we have monopolies. And when you have monopolies, it's very difficult to know accurate pricing, how much something really costs. There's no competition. So you just don't know. You're out there on your own. So how do we do pricing here at the city? Well, pricing is done by the mayor and 5 city council votes that have to be convinced, in this case by the Public Works Department, that the increases are needed. And let me mention, during my years on the city council, I found that it's not very difficult to get 5 votes to pass these increases. We've been doing it year after year after year after year. I guess this time around, though, I guess I'm going to have to admit that I'm not convinced that these increases are truly justified. So I will be opposing this ordinance.
Council, any other comments before we vote? Very good. A roll call vote, please.
Councilor Zerpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 17.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the revised ordinances of the city by revising sewer utility rates and charges as found in Chapter 41, Utilities.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. This is for the water reclamation rates. As you know, this again is 2-year rate recommendations for rates that would go into effect January 1 of 2013 and January 1 of 2014. We continue to make substantial investments into our system, which is the key driver of this rate increase. We're recommending specifically for residential customers an 8% rate increase in both 13 and 14. And again, this builds off the comprehensive analysis that we provided on June 19th and the update to that we provided last Tuesday. And we're here to answer your questions.
Very good. Mr. Stenga had an opportunity, and he did address this item. But is there anybody else who wanted to speak to this item as well? Very good. Thank you. I'll defer to Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Mark, do we have a history of maybe one of your famous slides showing the rate increases we've done over the last few years?
Mm-hmm. This slide shows back to 2011, but one of the things that we have done since 2006 is to fully analyze not only the operational and maintenance needs, but the capital needs of this utility. And we have, for nearly every utility, up to this year have had to make recommendations for double-digit rate increases. We are, absent this utility, which we're getting closer to more inflationary rates in the near term. The other utilities, we've also been through double-digit rate increases that have aligned these rates with to ultimately not only fund the intensive capital needs, but then the following debt service. And so, Councilor, I don't have it today before 11, but I will tell you from 2006 up to this point, it has been double-digit rate increases to get us to this point where we not only can effectively fund the operation and maintenance, but also a good, solid, long-term capital plan.
If I may, as this is an enterprise fund, and we, as a council, approved quite a large loan from the state, didn't we, to do some sewage work?
You did.
Okay. So that debt service is included in this also?
That's right. This utility alone, there's been a $20 million invested in the last 18 months into infrastructure in the city.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Rolfing.
And Mark, would you remind the people here and all our viewers at home how many years ago and how many years we did not ask for an increase in any rates in the enterprise funds, and why we had to we put ourselves in that kind of position where we didn't improve, we didn't have a reserve at all, and why we did this?
Certainly, I won't speak for prior to 2006, but prior to 2006, there was minimal to no rate increases primarily, and we look back that 20 years, and what essentially starts to happen is that if you don't stay up with this infrastructure, and what we've learned is that this infrastructure is just extremely capital intensive and it's extremely expensive. It's in the wastewater world, it's a very corrosive environment, so you don't put mild steel in, you put stainless steel in. And so what you'll find is that with the right amount of user fees, you can make the right amount of investments into your system, and I can only speculate that capital plans could have been more aggressive to not require those rates to go up. What we've done is, just like here, you see a picture that takes you out to 2022, and there's specific capital projects that take you out past there to make sure we can not only fund those capital projects, but also keep up with the operation and maintenance.
In other words, we got behind and we had to catch up, and now we're planning.
That's right.
Thank you.
Councilor Erdenbach.
You know, and I guess I would remind my colleagues on the council of, not too long after the mayor and some of us on the council were elected in 2010, there was a break in the sewer line, and it wasn't just a little crack. It was huge, and it affected a huge amount of the city. And we talk about elderly customers. They were frightened because they didn't know. They couldn't flush the toilet. They couldn't run their water. They couldn't do all these things. I think it's huge for us to understand what those investments mean to us as a community. No matter what our income is, these investments in the sewer project are huge. And then the last thing I would say, and I bother Mark about it every now and then, I walk that bike trail from Cliff Avenue to the Minnesota Avenue Bridge because I'm watching that particular piece of the sewer that's being rebuilt, because that's going to have a huge effect on my neighbors in the Pam Road area who have had sewer backups in their basements for years. It's been the norm because our system was not designed to handle the growth that we have been doing. And so I commend, when we talk about investments, this is one of those things that is about quality of life. This is going to affect all of us, and that we have to keep up with this and get ahead of it.
Councilor Inman.
And I think that's what's key here, too, is that you talk about 2012 and the fact that you're looking at infrastructure needs, what capital needs are going to be by that time. And the rates that we're setting today are taking into account those future needs of the city. So we're able to keep the rates at a fairly minimal amount, rate increases at a fairly minimal amount in the big picture compared to the big jumps that we would have if we did not do adequate planning. The fact is we're going to grow. And the fact is we need that infrastructure. And we need to plan for it now, because in the future it's just going to be just that much more expensive. And without the quality of life things like water and sewer, It just isn't going to be a good community at all. So I do commend your team. We saw how they worked when we had the sewer issues that we had, and how the worker bees wanted to get out there and dig, and you guys kept holding them back because you wanted to make sure it was the right spot. So I do commend everybody. They did a super fantastic job, and good job to your teams.
Councilor Entenmann, would you consider making a motion to move this item forward?
So moved, Entenmann.
Second, Karski.
It's been a motion to approve this item by Councilor Entenmann. It was seconded by Councilor Karski. Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, I have a question here.
Absolutely.
For
Go
Mark.
right ahead, sir.
Mark, I was just curious, in calculating the sewer rates, is it correlated 1-to-1 with how much water you use or not?
What we use for flows is that we'll look at a customer's use specifically for residential, your November, December, January, and February. We average what you use in those months because we know you're likely not outside doing non-essential functions, and then we average what that amount is, and then that's what you get billed for the entire year.
Oh, okay.
And so we don't want to make sure that we certainly wouldn't want to penalize someone that's watering their lawn in the summertime, assuming that that's going down the sewer, because we know it's not.
And then one other quick question is in regard to, we're raising the rates on consumers here in Sioux Falls, 8%, residential consumers.
That's correct.
Yes. But when it comes to outlying cities, we're actually lowering it, I think, to 3% rate increase. Is that right?
No, we're actually, and that'll be a discussion that we bring a little bit later this year, because we amend those by agreement.
Mm-hmm.
But what we're doing there is, for example, right now, if you're a house on the west side of Sioux Falls or on the east side of Sioux Falls, you pay the same volumetric rate. In the past, we haven't taken that approach with the outside customers. We call that the postage stamp approach. It costs the same to mail a letter across the city or across the country. And so we're doing the same with the outside customers, is that we're setting one rate if you're going to discharge wastewater into the city, but we also are providing them credits that if they do maintain a lagoon system so that they can send us wastewater in the middle of the night, that Brandon does today, and if they have a large enough lagoon that they are actually starting the treatment, the biologic process, we know that that's not going to take so much chemical intensity at our plant, so we can also provide them a credit. And so in most of those cases, those rates are going up for all customer classes.
Okay, I guess
But we'll be doing that by agreement,
my
Counselor.
understanding, these credits would lower the rates. Because you're giving them credits, you're lowering their rates. So my primary concern, though, is when it comes to a sewer bill in Brandon, are the residents of Brandon who use our facility getting a lower sewer rate than the residents of Sioux Falls?
No, because they're not only paying our wholesale rate, but they're still maintaining their own collection system in town.
No, I agree.
Okay.
But overall, when you factor all that in.
No, we've actually provided some graphs in the past with the regional wastewater study that we've undertaken. And so probably in the end of the third quarter this year, we'll provide you all that information. I can certainly get it to you before then as well, though. But there'll be much more discussions about regional wastewater.
But Mark, to simplify it for Councilor Staggers and the people of Sioux Falls, a person who lives outside of our town, they're not paying a lower rate than a citizen of our city.
That's correct. Because they've got not only our unit, they've only got our wholesale rate, but they're also paying their incremental in-town rate that they've got.
I understand that. I just want to make sure we're not out-competed.
Good job.
You know, that's the main
No,
thing.
that's right.
Fair. Thank you, Councilor Staggers. Well,
this is Mayor, this is one snapshot that we did provide that you may want to refer to for what that combined water and sewer bill is around other cities. Sorry.
Thank you, Mark. Well, Council, good job. Good discussion. There has been a motion and it has been seconded and good discussion. But let's have a roll call vote, please. I'm so sorry. Councilor Staggers.
If I could just respond here. You know, I'm going to be voting no against this 8% increase for this year and also next year. And in our discussion, you'll notice we really haven't focused on the consumer. taking in the needs of the consumer. And that's what we have to start doing. It's important to be aware that obviously we need money to operate this system. There's no doubt about it. But it's how much we need and what kind of increase we should have, factoring in the consumer. And the consumer has been totally left out of this discussion.
A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intamin.
Yes.
And that has passed 7-1. Item 18.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the revised ordinances of the city by revising Chapter 18 thereof to increase rates at the landfill in Section 18-30.
Mayor and City Council, this follows through with the 2-year rate analysis on the tipping fees for the landfill. Our recommendation is to increase the MSW, which is municipal solid waste, the common garbage, by $1 per ton in 2013 and $1 per ton in 2014. Construction and demolition debris, which we refer to as C&D, our recommendation is to increase this by $2 per ton in 13, $1 per ton in 14, and we would also like to align the cost to handle asbestos. Its current charge is $15 per ton, and with the cost of service study that we've done, we would recommend to raise that up to $30 per ton. And we're here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mark. Is anyone in the public who wanted to speak to this item? Very good. Council?
Move approval.
Second, Erpenbach.
It's been a motion to approve by Councilor Rolfing. It was seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. Councilor Staggers.
Yes, if I could ask a question or two of Mark. Mark, I remember a number of years ago when we put in the pipeline down to the Poet plant in Chancellor, we were told we are going to make lots and lots of extra money, and I assume we did. Can you tell us how much money we're making off of that facility?
I can in generalities, and again, we can always provide a follow-up. Essentially, it's been a great partnership. We've found the ideal customer because the landfill generates methane gas 24/7, and Poet, or the Chancellor ethanol plant, uses fuel 24/7, and so we do not have to shut down to deliver them on a normal business day. Essentially what we've had is that we went online in February of 2009. We expected to have that investment paid back in about 4 years, and our initial investment for the 11-mile pipeline, the building, the scrubbers, we've met that already, and we in general sell about $200,000 worth of methane gas to Poet on a monthly basis.
So that's about $2.4 million. Am I doing my math right?
For
how much we sell to them? A year, yeah, excuse me, a year. So that's a good chunk of change.
It is.
And so I was so happy when we did that, and I thought, well, we'll keep the rates down. But here we're, once again, annual increases, and now we have new projects on the board, especially, I think, that $3.7 million cardboard facility. I mean, I guess I'm very concerned about the efficiency of how the money is being spent out there.
Well, I think
when we have a lot of revenue coming in.
I think one of the, we obviously take every step we can to buy the equipment correctly, all the way through to bulk purchase fuel, very capital intensive for equipment and fuel usage. But the other aspect of this is that this is a modern landfill. And I think our benchmark slide that we provided that Councilor Rolfing asked for really speaks to how competitively priced these landfill tipping fees are. And so I think one of the things that we can all really take pride in the City of Sioux Falls is that we did make that investment to not just burn that gas up into the atmosphere. We found a customer, and with that additional revenue, we truly have been able to hold rates down significantly with that investment, and it paid us back in record time.
But then we also have the reserve of 180 days. Is that correct?
We do on this particular utility, and we've met that target.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Councilor Sagers, thank you. Councilor Bach.
Mark, did we increase landfill tipping rates last year?
We did not.
We did not.
No.
Thank you.
Here's that graph, Mayor, just to refer to it.
Mr. Cotter, thank you. Well, Council, we do have a motion, and it has been seconded. We've had some good discussion. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson? Entman?
Yes.
That has passed 7-1. Item 19.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the revised ordinances of the city by increasing water rates as found in Chapter 41, Utilities.
Mayor and City Council, this is the fourth and final utility that will make recommendations for rate adjustments. This has been the true success story. Last year, the projection for rate increases for 13 was to be 9%, and the projection for 14 was to be 4%. The expenses have been tightly controlled. We've had favorable bids. Our analysis, and again, this one looks out a number of years. We still use top-notch rate consultants to help us with these modeling efforts. The recommended rate increases for water in 2013 is 3%, and in 14 is 3% as well. And we're here to answer questions.
Folks, anybody in the audience want to speak to this item? Very good. Council?
For the consumers of Sioux Falls, move approval.
Councilor Rolfing?
Second, Erpenbach.
There's been a motion to approve, and Councilor Erpenbach has seconded that item. Councilor Staggers?
Yeah, for the consumers of Sioux Falls, I'd like to ask Mark a couple questions.
Please do so, sir.
My understanding is that Lewis and Clark wants to adjust their rate structure to encourage us to buy more water. So we have an interesting situation. This ordinance here wants to raise the water rates. And at the same time, Lewis and Clark wants to adjust the rates to make it more advantageous for us to buy water. Now, I guess I go along with the Lewis and Clark philosophy. Cheaper price for water, instead of what we've been doing now for many years here in Sioux Falls. You pay a higher price for water, you get less. Why aren't we following the Lewis and Clark philosophy?
Well, we've had great discussion about this, Councilor, and I think from our standpoint that conservation in the city of Sioux Falls has been talked about for the last 50 and 60 years. I would say in early 2000s when predecessors started a very aggressive conservation program to start changing out some of the high-flow toilets, putting in smarter irrigation systems, putting in washers that use a fifth of what the water used. We've taken the philosophy that let's make sure that the fixtures are in the houses that use the least amount of water, still deliver the same service, and that's been a great benefit to the customers. And ultimately, we know we only have a prescribed amount of water rights in the aquifer. We can't just pump as much water out of the aquifer as possible and ultimately sell it to the customers. So there's a philosophy not only here, but it's across the country regarding conservation, and we feel like it would be a major step backwards if we took a different approach.
Councilor Sayers?
Yes, I guess what we still have is a drought mentality. We're always anticipating the next drought. We're always anticipating the next drought. Now we have Lewis and Clark, and we still have this drought mentality. And at the same time, Lewis and Clark wants to sell us more water. I think we probably recognize, most of us here on the council, because of the financial problems of Lewis and Clark not getting federal funding, in the future, they're going to come and try to get more money from the city of Sioux Falls. Instead of giving it to us, why don't we buy some more water from them? They want to sell it to us and keep these rates down. It just doesn't make sense to continue the thinking of the past that we're always going to have a drought, we're always going to have a drought, we're always going to have a drought. Now, obviously, if that would ever happen, we at that time would have to adjust our thinking. Yes, we are going to cut back on water. But there's no reason to have a drought mentality when there's no drought. It doesn't make sense.
Even with the ability to buy more water from Lewis and Clark, their water cost per 1,000 gallons is more than what we can produce locally. And so we wouldn't be able to pass on additional savings to the customers in the near term. And I would also just reference that it's been dry now since last summer. Now that the rains that came in 2010 and a portion of 2011, the lakes up north are starting to draw down because we're starting to see on a weekly basis the flow in the Big Sioux River drop. And we believe that a consistent education to the customers on odd-even watering, no watering noon to 5, and some of those other tiered structures that are in place work very well for the customers. We hear a lot of positive comments about the philosophies that have been set, not only by this council, but previous, and I would urge you to stay with that philosophy.
Councilor Anneman.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Mark and his team. Greg, last night I had an opportunity to go to the open house that Lewis and Clark and the city had, and they had some great folks there. And Greg gave a good presentation about the way water works for us and the fact that the cheapest water is that in wells. That's the cheapest water, it's the easiest water, it's the cleanest water. And if you look historically what's happened in the bigger cities that we have, as the well water capacity has diminished and decreased, we've gone to surface water, like the rivers and the lakes, which cost significant more dollars to purify and pump and everything to the neighbors that we had. Now, if you look at some of the coastal cities that we have, if you look at the problems that California have had, where they are actually now pumping salt water into the wells and they have into the ground in order to recharge their aquifers, and they have to put a barrier so that the salt doesn't get into that water, it becomes extremely expensive. So quite honestly, if you look historically what's out there, you look at the plan for the future for 50 years, I think we've got a great plan. We're ensuring that we're going to have a great water supply as we have all of our utilities for these citizens, and we're doing it at what we say right now for the next 50 years is going to be an extremely reasonable price compared to what's happening on the coastal cities of this great country. So I'd like to, again, commend the city and the staff that we have for the great work that they've done.
Council, good job. We appreciate that. There has been a motion made. It has been seconded. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Can I make a last-minute
Been
comment?
a motion made. It has been seconded. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
But I would like to make a comment here as to why I'm voting the way I am.
Councilor
I'd like
Staggers.
to call the question.
There's been a motion made. It has been seconded. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilor Zerpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
No.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intiman?
Yes. Thank you. That is passed 7
Mr.
to
Mayor?
1. Item 20.
Mr. Mayor?
Councilor Staggers.
Yeah. Just one comment. I guess when it's time to vote, if somebody wants to express why they're voting the way they are, I think it's very appropriate to do that. And I wish I'd have had the opportunity to just briefly say, this is not even focused on the consumer.
Councilor Staggers, on item number 16, you expressed your opinion in regards to the following 4 votes. You explained to the people of Sioux Falls why you were going to vote no on those items. Then on items 16, 17, 18, and 19, you again expressed your opinions, I thought very articulately, very clearly, and I think it was very clear to the people of Sioux Falls that you were going to vote no and why you were going to vote no.
Partial reasons, yes.
And I certainly respected that. I heard it loud and clear. I think the people of Sioux Falls did as well. That's why I asked for the vote. I do thank you. Item number 20.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending Section 26-18 of the revised ordinances of the city by bringing the penalties section into compliance with state law limitations placed on city ordinance penalties.
Welcome.
Mayor, City Council, Keith Allenstein, City Attorney's Office. This is a very simple amendment. Section 26-18 presently allows a penalty for being on the Big Sioux River after the governor has declared emergency to be fined up to $500 and a penalty of up to 6 months in jail or any combination. By state statute under 9-19-3, cities are limited in the penalties that they can prescribe. The penalties that we can prescribe are up to $500 and up to 30 days in jail. So this is just to bring this into compliance.
Thank you. Folks, this is a first reading, so you don't have an opportunity to speak, but I will defer to the council. Council, any comments on this item? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, my question is, why do we have this in city ordinance? Why don't we just use the state law?
I was actually trying to find the exact state law while I was sitting back there. I couldn't find it. I have to believe there is a state law out there. We have a number of city ordinances and state laws that overlap, I guess. The one benefit to the city of having this is that the fine money would come at least 65% of it to the city as opposed to all going to the state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Council, would anybody like to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, July 17th at 7 p.m. for this item?
So moved, Erpenbach.
Second, Entenmann.
Councilor Box made that motion, seconded by Councilor Entenmann. If there is no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann.
Yes.
Thank you. That is passed 8-0. Item 21.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, amending the revised ordinances of the city to update the industrial pretreatment program's definitions, standards, and wastewater local limits.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Bob Capel with the Public Works Environmental Division. With me this evening, I have Jesse Nyans, an environmental analyst who oversees our industrial pretreatment program. Back in April, if you recall, our team gave a full comprehensive presentation on the development of technically based local limits at a City Council informational. Since it has been 3 months and Councilor Staggers was not on the council at that time, I shall review the why and what and not the how of technically based local limits. We appreciate this opportunity to propose revisions to Chapter 41 to update our industrial pretreatment program. As you know, the city owns and operates a major regional wastewater collection and treatment system, which is called a publicly owned treatment works, or POTW. And I refer to that acronym because I will be using it a lot during this presentation. This is an aerial photograph of our POTW's advanced tertiary wastewater treatment plant located in the northeast part of Sioux Falls. It uses complex physical, chemical, and biological treatment systems to treat the wastewater from our region, and that region includes Sioux Falls, Brandon, Harrisburg, Prairie Meadows, and Renner. Our POTW collects and treats all domestic, commercial, and industrial wastewater from our service area to a level where it can safely be discharged to the Big Sioux River. In 2011, we treated and discharged 17.4 million gallons per day on average. Generally, POTWs are designed to only treat domestic wastewater. So the United States Environmental Protection Agency developed federal regulations to protect these federally funded POTWs from impacts from industrial discharges. In essence, they were protecting the infrastructure that they invested into. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency required Sioux Falls to develop and implement an industrial pretreatment program. This was an unfunded federal mandate. Our industrial pretreatment program is responsible for limiting the character and volume of pollutants being discharged to our treatment system to protect against pass-through or interference. The United States Environmental Protection Agency requires our pretreatment program to develop and implement technically based local limits to protect our commercial and industrial discharges. So what are local limits? They are the amounts of pollutants that a POTW can accept and prevent pass-through, interference, adverse health effects, or harm to the treatment facility or environment. I'd like to just touch base on the primary goals of an industrial pretreatment program. In essence, they are there to protect the POTW workers and public. They are there to prevent wastewater discharges which could harm our POTW. I'd like to show you this picture. It's an iconic picture in the industrial pretreatment program field. This was a picture that depicts the destructive aftermath of a sewer explosion in Louisville, Kentucky in early 1980s. A soybean processing plant discharged waste hexane to this POTW that caused the explosion. These types of incidents are extremely rare in the United States since the adoption of the Clean Water Act and the subsequent industrial pretreatment regulations. And for a side note, this is the 40th anniversary of the Clean Water Act. The next primary goal is to prevent interference of our biological treatment process. And the next one would be prevent pass-through of pollutants to the environment. The picture on the right is a picture of one of our biological activated sludge cells at the wastewater treatment plant. This is a cell that is a living biological system. It is where our operators grow good bacteria to basically break down the waste in our wastewater. The lower picture is a picture of a riverbank with thousands of fish that are dead. Fortunately, it is not here. We have been successful, and we have not had any fish kills or significant environmental impact to the Big Sioux River from a pass-through of the Sioux Falls POTW treatment system since the implementation of our industrial pretreatment program. Another primary goal is to continue the beneficial use of domestic wastewater residuals. Our POTW treatment system generates a sludge byproduct from treating wastewater that must be managed. Due to the low levels of pollutants and the high quality of the sludge that we have in a byproduct, the city is able to reuse this material as a soil amendment for our local agricultural community versus managing it as a waste. Other cities are not as fortunate. We are here today to talk about the local limits, which are a key component of our industrial pretreatment program. As we talked last time on how we would develop the local limits, we were proposing to revise some local limits and implement some new local limits for our city. We will be developing some concentration-based limits for arsenic, cadmium, copper, lead, nickel, selenium, silver, and zinc. We will be developing mass-based limits for biochemical oxygen demand, total spent solids, total Kaldol nitrogen, and molybdenum. This next slide is the most important slide for the presentation. This compares the proposed local limits to the new local limits that we are proposing to the council at this time. The left column is a list of pollutants that we have determined from a list of hundreds of chemicals that we've determined we need to develop local limits on. The second column is the existing daily maximum local limits. The third column is the proposed daily maximum local limits, and the fourth column is the units of measure for those pollutants. I'd like to draw your attention to the third column. As you can see, there are numbers that are in red text, black text, and green text. The red text means that we are proposing a lower, more restrictive limit than what we currently have. The black text means we are proposing a higher, a less restrictive limit than what we currently have. And the green text indicates that we are proposing new limits to the ordinance. Based upon our current industry operations, pretreatment systems, and historical data, we do not anticipate any significant impacts to our industrial community. The significant changes to these ordinances are the additions of the biological oxygen demand, the total spent solids, and total Kaldol nitrogen. These pollutants were added to protect our POTW and give the pretreatment program the opportunity to divide conventional pollutant loadings to the significant industrial users in our community with the greatest need. Who is required to comply with our local limits? All permitted significant industrial users, liquid waste generators, and liquid waste haulers. It is important to share that we have a unique program that those haulers and generators that are in compliance with our liquid waste control program can be exempt from these local limits. In our last presentation to City Council, Councilor Entenmann raised a concern and question about what would these impacts be to the industrial community. Based upon that concern, we developed and provided a survey to our 15 significant industrial users. And I'd like to highlight a couple of the responses to those questions for you, Councilor. The first one basically deals with historical monitoring data, and we asked them to look at the data, not just us, and tell us if they felt they would have any impacts or potential noncompliance issues with these changes. All industries said no. The second major question dealt with the actual financial impact. We asked these industries, based upon these changes, would you anticipate any financial economic impact on your facility? And again, all industries indicated no. Finally, the regulatory and public review. The South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources and the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency have both reviewed our city local limits proposal. The South Dakota Department of Environment and Natural Resources public noticed the proposed local limits. The state received no public comments. The Department of Environment and Natural Resources on June 14th gave formal approval of these local limits and changes to our industrial pretreatment program. The last slide here basically summarizes the major milestones in this 4-year process to revise these local limits. I would again like to thank my Public Works Environmental team for their hard work in helping me develop these new local limits. This was accomplished internally with existing staff, while many cities around the country need to hire consultants to develop their local limits. And at this time, I'd like to open up for any questions from the council.
Bob and Jesse, thank you very much. Council, any questions or comments or motions? Councilor Ruffing.
Yes, Bob. On slide, or the proposed local limits, current versus proposed.
Yes, sir.
I noticed that you've got some that are higher than they are right now. Why did we go higher with those?
These are technically based. We do not have the authority to basically create a limit that is not technically based. Even if we wanted to stay with the more restrictive limit, technically we can't, because if we took enforcement against the industry against that limit, they could potentially sue us and they would win in court because that limit would not be technically based. These limits are based upon thorough analysis of the limiting factor out there, whether it's the Big Sioux River, the biosolids, protecting the public, and it is technically based, and we have to go with the scientific criteria that it gives us.
So there's no national limit or national maximum limit that they have in there. It's testing that we do locally, and it says this is where we need to be.
Correct.
And so
it's a very good question. The pretreatment program has two types of limits. There are federal categorical limits that any industry that is a categorical industry, for example, Dakota Plating on Cliff Avenue, they're a plating operation. They have to comply with certain federal categorical limits no matter who they are or where they're at in the country. These are locally based limits to protect our POTW and our treatment system only.
Okay.
Councilor Anderson Jr.
Bob, one of the things I saw on the scale there too is the arsenic levels. In my reading on that, I see a lot of parts of the country are struggling with arsenic levels in their water and in their facilities. How are we actually going down on this? I found it quite encouraging.
Again, it was technically based upon the information that we had, based upon the data that we got from our sampling, told us we needed to be more restrictive limit, and that's what we did.
Thank you.
Council, this is a first reading. So would anybody like to set a date of hearing and second reading for Tuesday, August 7th at 7 p.m. for item 21?
So moved, Karski.
Second, Anderson.
Councilor Karski's made that motion, seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. If we could have a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intamin.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 22.
Deferred from the meeting of June 19th, 2012, a resolution providing recommendations and support for pension plan changes for City of Sioux Falls employees, and this is the South Dakota Retirement System recommendation.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. Bill O'Toole from the Human Resources Office. As this council knows, we've already had a fair amount of discussion on this topic, so I'm going to focus my comments today about the differences between the two proposals that are in front of you for consideration. We also have members of the pension system available in the audience to answer questions, and I'd also be happy to answer any questions that you might have as well. But agenda items 22 and 23, both those resolutions address the issue of pension changes affecting current and future employees of the City of Sioux Falls. Both resolutions are exactly the same in terms of their support for changes affecting current employees. And I think you'll see in both of those resolutions in subparagraph 1 that addresses the current employees. And those proposals are reflective of the recommendations made by the pension boards. And specifically what they recommended is increasing employee contributions by 1% in 2014, 1% in 2015, and moving to provide a flat dollar stipend to purchase their own health insurance in lieu of access to the city's plan. Now, where the two resolutions differ is with respect to the future employees of the City of Sioux Falls. Agenda item 22 recommends support to move future employees to the South Dakota Retirement System. Agenda item 23 recommends support to create a new tier structure within the existing pension program, and this recommendation is also consistent with the pension board recommendations. And specifically, those proposals include increasing employee contributions by 2%, removing lump sum payouts from inclusion in pension calculations, removing access to the city's health plan at retirement with no stipend, and increasing the normal retirement age for general division members. As you process these resolutions, obviously only one can move forward. So in the scheme of the consideration, if item number 22 prevails, then item number 23 would not, or if item number 23 were to prevail, then item number 22 would not. One last comment I did want to mention that there was some information that was reported that there were recommendations made by the board's actuarial consulting firm, Kavanaugh McDonald. They did not specifically issue independent recommendations. It was the pension board who issued the recommendations. The actuarial consultant that the board hired provide them advice and direction and help facilitate the discussion. So I just wanted to clarify that. And again, I'd be happy to take any questions. The spokesperson for the pension boards, Angeline Lavin, is also present and would be happy to answer any questions. And with that, I would like to respond to any questions you might have.
Bill, thank you for that summary. We appreciate it. This is actually a resolution where the public has an opportunity to speak as well. I would like to announce, though, before we go to the public discussion, as Bill mentioned, item 22 and 23 are fairly similar in nature. So what we'd ask is that if you are going to come forward to speak on items 22 or 23, we'd ask you to do that now. Just come forward, state your name, please, and if you could keep your comments to 5 minutes or less, the council would appreciate that. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I may have a hard time with the 5 minutes, but I will do my best. Basically, with the, I'm sorry, my name is David Duntman. I'm the president of the Fraternal Order of Police Labor Council, representing the sergeants and police officers for the City of Sioux Falls. You've heard a lot from the management and everything, and I just wanted to come up here and give you guys an opportunity to hear the other side and listen to some other numbers. Basically, as far as the new hires goes, we do not have any opposition for changing. We do not represent them, so we don't have a standing in that anyway, but we have no opposition. I think saving $207 million is a good step for you to go. We did have some questions, and we did ask for and did receive a meeting with some of your staff, including Bill O'Toole, Angie Youthy, Gail Eastland, and Chief Barthel. It was a very good meeting. I appreciate their time, and we learned a lot. One of the reasons for the meeting was to speak with them to see if there's anything we could do to make this more palatable to current employees, because as it stands, it's kind of a tough sell, to be honest with you. We were asking if there are any differences that we could make for the current employees to make it so that we could convince our membership to vote for this, like taking one part out, adding another. And basically, we were told that it's an all or nothing concept. The new employees would save $207 million. Our opinion is that's plenty of money. It should cover all the liabilities that you're concerned about for the next 30 years. $277 in savings was not enough, and that would be including the stipend and the new employees. That wasn't enough. $289 million wasn't enough. That would be including a 1% stipend increase. The only acceptable number that can be presented to you today is $311 million. Basically, it's all take and no give, and there's really no incentives that I can see for the membership to vote for it. Just some of the costs for us, you've heard the numbers for the cost of the city, just some costs for the employees. Raising the rate 10% will cost a senior officer about $1,300 a year. Last year I paid $5,200 to the pension, and this increase would raise it to $6,500. A senior sergeant would raise it about $1,450, and the amount of increase for the chief of police would be $2,600. Just to let you know that in the early 90s, when I was an employee, we raised the pension for us from 6% to 8%. And raising it from 8% to 10% would be a 66 increase in my contribution to the city's pension fund over 23 years. This debate has already spurred some savings over the last few years. The Fraternal Order of Police actually approached city management and stated that we did not want to raise, that we would forego it. We wouldn't even go through negotiations. And we got a 0% raise in 2011. 2012, also a 0% increase. And there was an approved 2% increase in 2013, but that's all going to be absorbed into the new pension. So basically 3 years, no raises for a city who says that they're extremely well-funded, everything's fine, not a problem. The valuation study that the city did, or gets hired every year, was done, and it in itself agrees that the no wages reflected actually helped offset some of the increases in the pension costs. $311 million is a good savings for 150,000 residents of Sioux Falls, but you have to realize that by the city saving $311 million, that cost will then be shouldered by about 1,100 members that are currently contributing to the pension system. And my question is, how do I tell my people to vote for this? And I guess my goal here is to ask you guys to consider the 207 savings and leave the current employees system the way it is. We firmly believe that the $207 million is plenty enough to save what we need to save. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Dave, thank you very much. Great job. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to the council? Mr. Stenga, welcome.
Tim Stenga. I guess we got to realize that 3/4 of the people that work and live in Sioux Falls don't have a pension plan. They used to have a 401k that their bosses paid into, and you matched them. But now the 401ks have been taken away from the workers, so they don't have a 401k unless they put their own money into it. 9 times out of 10, 3/4 of the workers in Sioux Falls, again, have not had a raise for 5 to 10 years. They're underpaid. I just don't understand where we're coming from. A lot of towns right now, a lot of big cities are going bankrupt because of pension plans. I worked for Morel's for 14 years. I had a pension, went to a 401k plan. What's the difference? You know, times are tough. Times are a lot different than what they were before. But I'll tell you, a lot of people in this town would beg for a pension plan, would beg to have insurance. A lot of people have to pay $600 to $700 a month just to have insurance on their families. And when they do get a raise, where does that raise go? Their insurance goes up 35%. Their raise doesn't even cover the insurance costs. Now, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of whining up here, but I'll tell you something, the citizens of Sioux Falls deserve this contract. If the people don't want it, that's fine. But I just think it's time that we start stepping up for the people of Sioux Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Stenga. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to the council on this item or on item number 23? Welcome. And folks, if there's anybody after this individual, we'd ask you to just be prepared and come forward. Welcome.
Hello, I'm Angeline Lavin. I am a current member of the Fire and I was a longtime member of the Fire Board, and now I'm currently a member of the Employee and Police Board. And I just wanted to make sure that we kind of got out in the open what the process was that we went through as two boards working together to make these recommendations that were requested. About 18 months ago, Mayor Huther came to us and said, you know, I'd like you to take a look at the pension plans and see what we can maybe do about stabilizing contribution rates and decreasing contribution rates. And we do recognize that the employees of the City of Sioux Falls benefit from a great pension plan. And it is an excellent benefit. A defined benefit plan is something that not everyone today has the opportunity to enjoy. And thankfully, because of the way the plan was set up and the way it's been managed for about 60 years, it's a very well-funded plan. The state of South Dakota also has a very well-funded plan. We are very lucky to live in this state and this city, where our forefathers have really taken it upon themselves to fund these things and to make sure that they were paid for as we went along. And what we did in earnest was to start a discussion about what could be done, because we want to make sure it's sustainable for the future. That was really our goal. And so we came up with some recommendations after studying many options for about 18 months. We hired a consulting firm to help us because we thought this was too big of an issue for us to handle on our own. We are basically a volunteer board, and there are some city employees who also serve on the board. And we came up with some recommendations that would save about $200 million in total, and that does include both our recommendation for new hires, which is to stay with the existing plan but go with some changes, and that does include the savings that would result if an employee vote is successful and contributions are increased by 2% over 2 years, and the stipend is instituted to replace the current retiree health plan. We did think that because there is mandatory retirement age for public safety workers, that it is important to provide some sort of health coverage for current employees when they retire, because they started employment with the city with the understanding that there would be a benefit there for them. We are recommending that for new hires going forward, there would be no promised retiree health benefit under kind of the new structure that would be created for new employees. We felt as a board that it was important to keep all employees in the same plan for sustainability issues for the long term. Even if new hires were to move to the South Dakota system, the state system, the City of Sioux Falls will still be in the pension business for decades, until the last beneficiary of the youngest city employee today is no longer with us. So we're talking a lot of years. Even if you did make the change and recommend that new hires go to the state system. And in fact, our consultants said that it's possible that in the short term, costs could increase for the existing plan if new hires are moved to a different system, because you'll have the younger people who are paying in a different system, and you'll be left with the existing employees and the current retirees in the existing system. So on behalf of the boards, I just wanted to convey that to let all of you know that we did spend a lot of time thinking about this, talking about this. We had a lot of special meetings, and we did put forth the proposal that we felt was best. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Angela, thank you very much. And on behalf of the city, I know we all thank you and the rest of the board for your stewardship. Is there anybody else who wanted to speak to the council? Welcome.
I have one slide to load here. Matt McCravey, I'm a member of the firefighter pension system, member of the Board of Trustees. This slide here is the figures that were presented back in November of 2011. It was provided by Kavanaugh McDonald. Excuse me. And I apologize, I requested the important thing that we looked at here is normal cost, and that's what it cost the city on average to provide the pension benefit. And here, under the first columns on the left, we look under CMC for Kavanaugh McDonald. I'm going to concentrate just on general employees because it gets complicated when you look at that many numbers for that many groups. General employees, general cost is 11.24%. If we move over, that's what it costs us to provide the benefit currently. If you go over into the retirement savings change and we look at increasing contributions, this was our proposal to increase 2.2%. Now we've gone to a normal cost of 11.29, and there is a special note at the top. You'll see that it says cost impact is not necessarily additive. There are small anomalies that when you change one function, it changes another. But seeing as how the request didn't get through and we couldn't get the actual normal cost, we have to add these together. If you go with the 11.29 for the normal cost, we also, with the change that we proposed for increased normal age, saving of 2%, and also removing the lump sum pay of 1.2, it comes up with a new normal cost of 11% to provide this benefit. And now when we look at that 8%, the employees on that side will also pay 5%. So we have a normal cost now for the city of 3% of payroll, which I propose is a 50% reduction from what the state system is. This slide was key in the pension board's decision. Once we saw these savings that we were able to maintain in our own while providing benefits that we thought were equal or better, this is why we steered towards being able to make a system within the city that worked for us. I would stress that without getting these numbers back from Kavanaugh McDonald or some other consulting firm of exactly the cost of our proposal versus the state pension system, it's too early to make a decision.
Matt, thank you very much. Anybody else want to speak to the council on item number 22 and 23? Very good. Thank you very much for your input. I know the council appreciates it, and so do I. Council, I now defer to you. Any questions, comments, motions on item number 22?
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Aguilar.
I'd like Bill O'Toole to come forward. Bill, I'd like you to share some of the information that you have shared with me over the past couple days as far as the South Dakota State Retirement System. From the information that I was given, the majority of those that are involved with the state system also receive Social Security benefits. However, our fire and police do not participate in the Social Security system.
That's correct, Counselor. Sometime prior to 1983, the City of Sioux Falls opted out of Social Security for its public safety employees. And irrespective of the direction you move, that does not change. We are an opt-out employer when it comes to Social Security.
And so that means...
Please, Councilor Aguilar.
So that means that when, other than the fire personnel in Aberdeen and Watertown, our public safety personnel would not be receiving the same type of benefit then as the others that are involved in the state system?
As far as the pension plan itself goes, it would be the exact same plan. But in terms of your point that our public safety employees would not be Social Security participating members, that's correct. I know Aberdeen and Watertown firefighters are also in that same boat. I don't know, and I can't speak on behalf of the state if there's anybody else out there. Those are the only two that I'm aware of. But in terms of the benefit structure, they all receive the benefit structure. But then those other employees are contributing to Social Security from their respective employers. So the employees are contributing 6.2%, and the employers are contributing 6.2%.
And then, Bill, would you explain what changes in state law would need to be enacted in order for the City of Sioux Falls to become part of the state system?
Yeah, we've known all along in our discussions with Rob Wiley and when he approached the fiscal committee that there would be a requirement, and it escapes me right now which section it is, but there's a provision right now that basically says employers, as they get into the South Dakota retirement system, it's all employees that are in the system. And of course, our proposal is that only future hires would go in. So they would need to make a change to that provision that would exclude Sioux Falls, because obviously we're not sending all of our employees that way.
And that would be made by the legislature?
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilor Jameson.
Bill, on the vote by the employee group, how often can they bring a vote like this to the body?
You mean with respect to the current employees and the proposals that are under consideration?
Right.
I'm not sure I'm following your question. How often?
Well, I mean, when was the last time they voted on changes to their current pension plan?
Quite honest, I'm not sure. I mean, I've been around for about 15, 16 years, and I'm not aware of when the last vote was. I don't know, Angie, do you recall? Back on 2004, that had to do with the manner in which the pension contributions were made and changing it from an after-tax to a pre-tax contribution. But there might be somebody else from the public safety arena that might have some familiarity. 1992 is what I'm hearing, but it's been quite some time.
Right. I guess what I'm trying to get to as well is that you know, this body, of course, is only going to give a recommendation as to the direction that we think the body should do. Right. I mean, the boards are going to actually just put it up for vote, and they're just going to take our recommendation, however we might give it to them, and propose it to the employees, right?
Right. So what we would do process-wise, Counselor, is we would hold education meetings with the employees to help them understand exactly what the proposals accomplish, why we're doing it, and then they would vote collectively on both the increase in contributions and on the health care piece.
Okay, thank you. And the idea is that at the end of the day, they hold the keys to these changes. We cannot make these changes without their involvement.
That's correct. If the vote of the current membership is not to adopt those changes, it's done at that point. If they vote to approve it, it comes before this body, and you all would then make a vote as it relates. And if it fails at either level, the issue would fail.
It's just that the responsibility lies with the employees, and that's just an odd place. And not that that's maybe Kermit is actually the guy who put this in my ear, sitting right here, that the conflicts of interest, perhaps, that these employees are deciding their benefits and maintaining them. And I suppose that's the power of the union. I'm trying to understand this whole thing, but it seems odd that they would be the ones who decide how much they should contribute or not. And this body is merely just here to give a recommendation. It just seems...
Yeah, and I think I understand what you're saying, Counselor, and that is why you're looking at this, and we're looking at this in two pieces, current employees and future hires, because there's a process that needs to be followed differently for each of those individuals because of some of the internal requirements that are built into the state ordinances or the state statutes and the city ordinances.
So if I get this right, if we move all the future employees over to the state system, that body, those employees do not have an opportunity to vote on their pension plans because it's handled by the state.
Right, and if you're in the state system, the body that's responsible for changes in the future would be the legislative body, the South Dakota legislature.
So if indeed we needed to get away from allowing the employees to decide their own fate, this is how you would start, is by weaning off all the employees and over into the state, because in some future date, this current group of employees would all be gone, and they would not be making decisions. In fact, I should say, financial decisions for the city. The council usually makes those decisions on funding things, but in this case, the tail is wagging the dog. Am I right on that?
No, you're correct. And what ends up happening then with the internal structure, if you are just simply addressing the way it is today, the only way you then make changes is that prospective application where you're talking about future changes for future employees, if that makes sense.
I think so.
Absent that requirement, the only way for you to do that is to deal with the future. Because as we've learned through this process, changes that this body would make for future employees is not a matter that's subject to a vote of the active membership.
Councilor Jameson, thank you. Councilor Mbach.
Thank you. I apologize. The gentleman who represented the Firefighters Pension Board, would you come up and show us that slide again? And then my
Matt?
question for you, Bill, is has council seen that slide before? I'm looking through my folder. I've been carrying this around with me, living with it, and I'm not seeing that slide.
It's contained in the Kavanaugh-McDonald Plan Design and Study report. It's, obviously it was a 100 and some page report, but it was contained in that report.
Oh, God. See, I didn't read the 100 and some pages. I have failed. Do we have that same sort of chart for the South Dakota retirement system?
No. Again, what you're looking at here, you have two different actuarial consulting firms look at two different issues at two different points in time under different parameters. The city's retained actuary, as it related to any analysis for the South Dakota retirement system, they did an analysis that only looked at a kind of a 5-year outlook and the impact as it relates to 5 years. Kavanaugh-McDonald took a longer term and was under a different set of circumstances at the time. But yes, that was right out of the report, and yes, it's kind of confusing.
Councilor Henneman.
I do commend the pension boards. They did do a good job, and they did exactly what they were asked to do, take a look at it, come up with some recommendations, and I believe they did do it. To Councilor Jameson's point, we need to look to the future, and I wish we all had a crystal ball to tell what that future is. But what I do know, and Mr. Stenga did hit it on, the times have changed. And this is no longer a number of years ago when this pension was put in. Times really have changed. And it is up to all of us. It is a resolution. It's a recommendation to move forward. I like the recommendation of the pension boards. They did a good job with that. We're obligated to those folks now under the agreements that we have, as we are to those that have retired already in the city. And I believe that the plan that, looking at the South Dakota retirement plan is a good plan. It's a proven plan also, and it does get us out of the pension business, albeit in the future. I understand that, and at this point in time, I'm willing to accept that. But I really do believe that it's the way that we need to go. Times have changed. They're never, ever going to be the same. I hate to say that, but they're not going to be the same. And we have to give the future body, these counselors that will come after us, the opportunity to make the good, prudent decisions that they need to make on part of the city. So thank you for all your work on this, and thank you to the pension board.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Bill, let's go back to the future employees and moving them into the state fund. Okay, so two things actually have to happen there. We have to get the state legislature to approve what the plan that we have in front of us now, correct?
The only thing you would get them to approve is to allow our future hires to have access to the South Dakota retirement system. So it's just it's a legislative change to a statute, because right now it says all of the employees would have to go, and we're suggesting only partial. So it's just, I don't want to say just a legislative change, but it is a legislative change that would need to be accomplished to affect that change.
Okay, and if that change doesn't happen, where are we at? Because tonight we're going to make a decision, and then we're going to hope the legislature makes a decision for us in the future here.
Well, and I guess I would characterize it a little bit differently, Counselor, in that what you are doing is providing guidance and direction on a course of action that you wish to pursue at this point in time. You're giving your blessing to moving in that direction. Obviously, if for some reason something didn't occur at the South Dakota legislature for that to happen, we would have to come back and retool and visit once again on what we believe would be the course of action. Now, obviously, there are no guarantees in life, but as we have visited closely with Rob Wiley, the Executive Director of the South Dakota Retirement System, he certainly has not conveyed any concerns that there would be any significant hurdles that would prevent us from doing it, but yet, obviously, we still have to follow the process.
But we're talking the South Dakota legislature, correct?
Yes, we are.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Karski.
Along the same lines as Councilor Anderson was going, is that something that the South Dakota retirement system, Mr. Wiley, takes to the legislature, or is that something that we have to have a sponsor for?
The way he recently described it to me was that the City of Sioux Falls would lead an effort. They would be supportive in the process, work with their board as well. and they would help us with drafting the legislation as well to make sure that it's done correctly.
So they would work on getting it sponsored?
I don't know if you use those words, but there would be a lot of cooperative effort in getting this done.
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing, did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Yes, I will.
Councilor Rolfing.
But I'll yield to Councilor Staggers. I see that he is ready to go.
Okay, thank you very much.
Right, Councilor Staggers, I apologize. Go right ahead, sir.
Thanks a lot, Rex. I have a number of questions, Bill. I got a phone call from a rather irate state employee, and it's in regard to the $40 per month per year of service until medical service until Medicare age. Just taking a look at an example, do I have this right? For 20 years of service, multiplied times 40, that's $800. And then times 12 is $9,600 they would be receiving for medical. Is that right?
No, I think your first number was correct. I think an $800 a month would be right. So it's $40 per month per year of service.
Okay. That's $800
a month.
A month, then times 12.
Correct.
And that would be $9,600?
On an annual basis, that's right.
Yeah, on an annual basis.
Annual basis.
Yeah, annual basis. Okay, now, they don't have that in the state. But let me just ask a theoretical question now then. Let's suppose a person gets $9,600. Is there any requirement they actually spend it on medical insurance? Or can they get the medical insurance from their spouse who might be working, or they get another job and get medical insurance?
Councilor, no, there is no requirement on how they use those funds.
Okay, so this
It's
just basically...
been earmarked towards that purpose.
Yes.
But you are correct, it could be used for other purposes.
It's basically free
The
money.
intent behind the proposal is to recognize the liability that exists within the health plan and the costs that go with it. To be quite frankly, what it is, it's an opportunity to get out of the healthcare system entirely and establish a group of employees who would receive that stipend, and eventually you're completely out of it.
Well, I understand trying to get out of it, but most businesses do not have a system like this at all, private business. So let me see here. I guess that's the only question I have right now.
Councilor Staggers, thank you. Councilor Rolfing.
I'm going to comment on a couple of things. First, Bill, can we separate the two? From what I've heard you talking about, we almost cannot separate, or can we separate the new or the future employees and the new employee or the current employees? You're kind of making it sound like if we would vote to do the South Dakota retirement system for the new employees, that it could almost be voided out by the vote of the union, the current employees?
No. The decision with respect to the future employees and where they go is a policy decision of the City Council. There is no vote of the active members as it relates to that issue. The vote only comes in as it relates to any changes to the current system and current employees.
Right. Of whether or not they would go with the South Dakota retirement or not South Dakota retirement, but whether or not they go with the proposal.
The proposal for the current employees is increase their contribution rates 2% over 2 years and the stipend.
The stipend.
That's what they would be voting on.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Secondly, if I may.
Please.
One of the comments that or the facts, I guess would be a good way to put it. One of the reasons that I'm looking at this is that the state of South Dakota has, number one, deeper pockets. Number two, they have a way of taxing people, the people of South Dakota, to, if they do get in trouble, and correct me if I'm wrong, if something happens if we get into a drought, if something happens in the state of South Dakota and the pension plan starts going south, we don't have that ability in Sioux Falls. We're pretty much maxed out on our taxation. We don't have the ability to really go after some extra money on this, where the state of South Dakota can very quickly turn on the money if they need to honor these promises that have been made. And that would seem to me to be one very good reason to move this liability, this huge liability that we have, and these promises that we're making to the state of South Dakota for those reasons. So the promises and the ability to make good on them. And that's one of the things that I'm looking at very closely in my vote. And so I guess that's one of the comments that I'd like to make at this point.
Councilor Rolfing, thank you. Councilor Jamieson.
If I could chime in there, Bill, was Councilor Rolfing right? Would the new dollars come from an increase in taxes? I thought the state system is essentially a trust account, and if it doesn't sum up, then they got thresholds that they've got to get to before they'd actually have their employees contribute more. The state legislature would say you employees have to contribute more. Do I have?
Well, Councilor, I am the HR director for the City of Sioux Falls, and while I'm well versed in some issues, I guess maybe how I would answer that issue is if, as Councilor Rolfing described it, if there's a drought out there and there's a need to modify what we're doing or how they're doing it, I think the legislature would have some control on how to address that, and they probably would do that by way of passing legislation that would perhaps increase in their contributions to the employees and the employers while they're fixed. And I think there is some precedent for that happening, although it doesn't happen with much frequency. But I think that's how they move and what direction they move in. As it relates to the taxation issue, I'll defer to somebody else on that one.
I would say that I had a long conversation this afternoon with, maybe I shouldn't say because I don't think they really want me to say, but that's how I understand it, is the revenue would be corrected by increasing the contributions from the employees and the employers. Vice versa, if the fund should be overfunded, say 110 or 120%, the employees then would receive an increase in benefits. So there is no scapegoat of taxing the employees. But what it does bring up is the interesting scenario that we have here, is that's the only way that we can cover the short gap is by paying it. And where do we get that money? We take it out of our general fund. Mm-hmm. And that's the piece that's kind of scary in this whole thing that certainly needs attention. And then if I could allude it to another point here is that, you know, I'm not getting any warm feelings about the employee groups willing to take on these current changes. I'm just not. Some from the testimony that I've already heard, others from people I've talked to. It's just unlikely. So the thing I'm trying to try to handle on is, what message do we have to send to the current employees that says, hey, the car's overheating. We got to slow down, or we got to add some water. We got to do something. We just can't keep going. How do we get that message? I know you said you're going to do some educational things, but by all accounts, you know, in my take of things, the economy is improving. The city's doing well. Things are going okay. But clearly we can't sustain this level of contributions, so it's almost like we need to set up some type of a policy or something that identifies that the warning light is on. We've seen it all over the country, of course, and we're not close to that. But how do we get that message to the employees so they accept this?
Yeah, you're exactly right, and I guess that's where I think the direction that we are headed right now is a recognition that it's time to make a change and do something different, to recognize that we can't keep doing things the way we've always done them and think things are going to change. We've watched the rates continue to rise, and we've seen that pattern for a number of years, and that's why we're here. We're trying to make those reasonable changes, those prudent changes that are going to get us to where we need to be to have a sustainable future going forward for our employees and still maintain that retirement security for them. Yes, we have an uphill battle with the education piece, but we are going to obviously do our best, because there's issues when it comes to healthcare particularly, that because the retiree group has to be a self-sustaining group, we're in a self-insured plan, we have to collect premiums to cover our expenses. And of course, as that group is older, there's more costs, and it's a smaller group to spread the risk. Their costs are already quite high, to be honest, and I think they would all testify to that. If they continue to do what they've always done, what you will have is access to health care you can't afford. And we can quickly show the rate at which premiums need to grow to cover those expenses. And this is a very viable alternative to get out of that healthcare business and at least afford them a very fair and reasonable amount of money to purchase healthcare out in the open market. It coincides with the healthcare reform changes that are out there and the insurance exchanges that are supposed to be out there. The same thing with respect to the pension contribution side of the equation. You're right, there's probably not as much of a carrot in terms of the there is on the healthcare side, but yet I think there needs to be some level of recognition that we just, again, can't keep doing things the way we've always done them and refuse to recognize that those costs aren't continuing to rise. So it is a challenge that we have ahead of us, Counselor, and we're going to work very hard to try to swing them and to understand that.
Yes, I would say you do have a challenge ahead of you, and I would urge probably that this discussion needs to turn to the employees to let them figure this out. This body needs to give them a recommendation, but we are not the final. I suppose we are the final, but that group needs to figure this out. And with your help, I suppose you'll get there one way or another, but well, I guess what I'm saying is the real decision makers are not right here. And we need to just get this out of our hands and into their hands so they can get going on it. That's
Councilor Rimmbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Bill, very early on in this conversation, a couple of people that I trust and respect and who have way more smarts and pensions than I do said to me, defined contribution, defined benefit, that is the only way to go. And that is the South Dakota retirement system. And then someone said to me, again, with some experience from this, he said, and he's been on the board previously, he said the current system is skewed against the city, that it is, puts the burden of the investment on the city, that the board, as Councilor Staggers and Councilor Jameson have said, has a conflict of interest, and that the overall expertise and skill set on the state level is better than it is here in Sioux Falls. Not knocking our skill set, but theirs is dramatically deeper and broader in terms of managing this kind of system. So all along I have thought I was voting for the state system until, and this slide that's I think still up there is saying to me again, if we did go to the South Dakota system, how do we protect our employees? I acknowledge full well that their system is far better than anything I have access to at this point in my work life, and that most folks in Sioux Falls have access to in their work lives. But how do we protect, especially our public safety employees? Are we going to skew it so badly for them that they really are underfunded in terms of, these people are working their bodies to the point where they have to retire early because it's a young man's job, but they can't necessarily work at another job either because they're shot, they're done, they're used up. Do we have a way, if we went either direction, do we have a way to protect those folks, especially because of that Social Security thing?
Well, and help me understand, when you say protect them, I guess I'm struggling with understanding what you mean by protecting them.
It looks like, and again, not the expert, but trying to see it as just a real person sees it, it looks like we wouldn't treat, if we went to the South Dakota retirement system, which I think is probably the smarter system, if we went to that system, it looks like we would not treat our public safety employees fairly compared to our general employees.
And I think what you're getting at is that Social Security concept
Partly, yes.
issue again.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, the formula for the South Dakota retirement system between their Class A and Class B employees is different. It's higher for public safety than it is for the general members. But you're right in the sense that what it would do with respect to some of those other folks is it would place more responsibility on the employee for their retirement planning going forward. They still would have a very good pension plan. The fact they're not participating in Social Security would then mean they're not contributing 6.2% into Social Security, and would be wise to then save those funds to help save for their retirement. But it is a recognition that on the Social Security side, it's an all-in, it's our understanding it's an all-in or an all-out process. We're an all-out employer. I still believe that the existing offering in the South Dakota retirement system, given the formula that they have and the income replacement goals that they have and those formulas, is still a good, solid plan.
And if I might, Mr. Mayor, one more question. Then talk to me about one of the other arguments against that state system is that because we would split up our current employee pool and our future employee pool, we would split them up. It creates some sort of class system within the existing employees, and that somehow this is a hierarchy and there are issues there. Can you address that for me? I'm not sure I can get my brain around that.
Well, you know, I guess it's one of those things that doesn't matter what you do. You're creating a new class, I guess, if you will, whether you did the revised tier structure or SDRS. The fact of the matter is you're going to be working next to somebody who's going to receive less than you did in a pension system. That goes back to that whole issue is we can't always keep doing things the way we have always done them without making change. This is a reality check that we do need to make change, and then no matter what happens, somebody's going to be in a different class, so to speak. And, you know, I don't know. My opinion is I don't know how much difference it makes whether you're in a new tier structure in the city system or you're in the state retirement system. I don't know how much difference that makes, and you know, maybe there's another employee here or another board member that could venture an opinion on that. But I guess that's my look, is no matter what you do, you're going to have a different category.
Good. Thank you very much.
Council, I don't want to stymie discussion, and we won't stymie the discussion, but I would like to have us consider, would anybody like to make a motion to approve item 22 and second it, at least for discussion purposes?
Move to approve Entenmann.
Second, Erpenbach.
So on a motion to approve number item 22, it was seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. Any further discussion? Councilor Staggers.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, at this time I'd like to introduce an amendment. And the amendment reads as follows. Amendment to Section 1. Remove lump sum payments from inclusion in final average pay calculations for all employee groups, end quote.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second, Anderson.
There's been a motion by Councilor Staggers to remove lump sum payments from an...
No, to...
I'm sorry, it's amendment to Section 1.
Include, to add. To add the following phrase.
Right, exactly. I was just going to read the phrase, okay. Councilor Staggers. It is to remove lump sum payments from inclusion in final average pay calculations for all employee groups. Councilor Staggers made that motion. It was seconded by Councilor Anderson, Jr. Discussion. Councilor Staggers?
Yes. The reason I'm doing that is because of what I read in the employees' pension board plan for future employees. They have that exact phrase. So I think it's only fair that this apply to current employees in addition to future employees, particularly since this is viewed by many people as a very egregious activity. What happens is, as people get near retirement, they add to their income for retirement by selling vacation and sick time. When I was in the state legislature, that activity happened. People did not like it. The same thing continues to happen here at the city level. We got to get rid of this very egregious activity. Making money off of vacation and sick time, these benefits to try to increase your retirement pay. And of course, the most egregious level is usually done with the people with the largest incomes.
Councilor Elfman.
Bill, is that the, I want to make sure that that's effectively what is happening with this amendment to existing and to future employees.
If I understand the motion correctly, that what he has done is added a new proposal to the current employees to remove the issue of sick and vacation leave payments to count towards their final average pay for purposes of boosting their pensions. That language is in the issue for the future employees.
Okay.
Is that fair?
That's right, Bill. So it applied to future and present.
Because that's already in the future proposal.
Yes, that's right.
Councilor Rolfing, again, the future employees, that's already included. What Councilor Staggers is made a motion, seconded by Councilor Anderson, Jr., is to include existing employees as well. Councilor Aguilar.
Yes, I have a question for the city attorney's office. Can this be done, since this is, from my understanding, that it's in ordinance, and is it in current contracts? Can we, by resolution, make this type of change?
I guess how I would address that situation is, what you are proposing then is something to carry forward for a vote to the current employees.
Okay.
The issue of the payment of the unused sick and vacation time is an issue that's in the collective bargaining agreements for each of those respective groups of employees. What constitutes the definition of final average wages is in the pension ordinance. But this would be a concept that would then be part of the total vote that would go to those individuals.
And then we would vote on it because it is an ordinance also.
Well, what you would first, if the councilor's amendment passes, then when we go to the current employees with that vote, it would then include the increase in contributions, the health, and then the removal of the spiking.
Thank you.
And you said the word spiking, Bill, just for purposes of public's understanding, defining spiking, that is basically the lump sum payment.
Correct. It's the inclusion of the payment for unused sick and vacation time when somebody leaves active employment and becomes a retiree.
Thank you very much. Councilor Bogg.
Mine is just a procedural question then, because I don't disagree with Councilor Staggers on this. I do hope that it's something that we would impress on the employees. But my question is, the resolutions that we're looking at don't include that verbiage. That verbiage is in the original recommendation from the boards that was dated in March. Is that correct, Bill? And I just wonder what it is that I just am trying to rethink. What are we amending exactly?
That's fair. And Bill, if you want to take a crack at that.
I will try to take a crack at that.
Thank you.
I think the proposal is probably best if you're looking at item number 23. That's right. In number 2, second bullet point, it says remove lump sum payouts. And I think what Councilor Staggers was trying to accomplish is to pull that language into the discussion for current employees.
That's right, Bill.
It's just right here. Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Rolfing.
Bill, when you are visiting with the members of the union and talking about then 3 items, the 3 with this one included, will it be an all or nothing then, or will you be able to talk about these individual items?
The way it was envisioned from the get-go is to package it all up. I mean, that's part of the discussion. That's why you're making the recommendations that we are, is to carry forward those proposals that the elected body would like to see delivered. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and if you parceled that out in some sort of way where you voted separately, well, that would have obviously a drastic impact on how that process would work. So, but the idea would be to say, here they all are. You vote for it or you vote against it.
Is this going to make, in your opinion, it easier or harder?
Harder.
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing, I think Councilor Jamieson was probably trying to explain in a way that what the council is doing tonight is you're providing options for the existing employees to consider. And you're giving them your recommendations on how to proceed.
Right.
Now, that's the existing employees. But as Councilor Jamieson, I think, very eloquently stated, the authority or the control on that does not reside with me or with you. It resides with the employees of our town. And so they will take the things that you've discussed tonight, if you make a recommendation, and then Bill and team will then do their best to try to outline what it is that you've expressed tonight in the best way possible, and then allow the voting members of the current employees to decide yes or no.
And that's why I was wondering whether it was either a all or nothing package or we could split it out. So.
Very good. Bill, was that appropriate?
Yes, and I would just add that that discussion regarding that issue was held at the pension board level. I mean, they did talk about that issue.
Councilor Karski.
And to Councilor Rolfing's point, we're at the negotiating table here. And the point was made earlier that the employee groups are willing to give up a lot, and it doesn't seem like we're willing to give up anything. I would disagree with that, but I would say that as much as I like what Councilor Stagger's amendment would do, again, we're at the negotiating table, and adding another stipulation to this process isn't going to help to get this resolution passed. That being said, we are offering up to the employees the stipend. And again, as Councilor Staggers did the math, it seems to be a fairly generous stipend for the health insurance. And I cannot support the amendment even though I like it. And those are my comments.
Councilor Anderson, did you have a comment? And Councilor Staggers, I promise I'll be right back, but I thought he had waved at me.
Yes,
did you?
I did.
You did. Okay. Councilor Anderson Jr., and then I promise you, Councilor Staggers, I'll be right back to you.
Bill, going back to the future employees, until we get the state to change their rules about the total amount or the total employee base going to the state,
Yes.
And we start hiring new employees, are they going to stay under this plan until we get that changed?
They would, and I believe the absolute soonest we could be looking at an SDRS option would be at the conclusion of the next legislative session, which would then probably mean July 1st of next year would be the absolute soonest it could happen.
Okay, and let's say that we do get that done and that we start moving new employees into the state fund, basically telling the city employees that we're going to get out of the pension plan someday. How do we keep the current employees' pension plan solvent if we're not putting new employees into it?
Obviously, we'll continue to get an annual actuarial evaluation from our retained actuary that's going to tell us, based on all of the actuarial assumptions within the plan, both economic and non-economic, recognizing that a future segment is going to go a different direction and not be contributing that revenue. They'll tell us what our contribution rates are going to be. And I think you heard Kavanaugh McDonald talk about that concept a little bit, that when you do that, likely what happens is your pension board then reassesses its current allocation and its assets and looks at it differently, knowing there's an end date in mind. And what happens, there's an initial increase in cost, but that long term then it significantly drops down, and that's where you realize the substantial savings with the shift.
Okay, and then just to get back to this negotiation or recommendation that we're prepared to make to our employees, they can separate them and say yes, no to individual parts of this, correct?
Now, the way we're introducing the proposal is to suggest here is what is being pursued from the elected body. They would like to see these three things, vote on them.
Thank you.
Bill, if I can only clarify, because I think, I don't know if you answered Councilor Anderson Jr.'s question as he had stated it. What he asked is, in these recommendations that are coming from this body, the employees of our city, they have the opportunity to adjust it, massage it, revise it to their accord and vote yea or nay on that, as Councilor Jamieson stated, because the control lies with them.
Correct.
Councilor Staggers.
Yes. First of all, I guess I didn't realize we were negotiating because I can't talk back and forth with our counterparts there. But when you take a look here at the big picture, I think the reality is is those city employees, like department heads, who greatly benefit from this spiking, yes, they're going to be against it. But at the same time, when you look at other employees who do not get as much income, I think they might, well, I'm sure many of them would be very much in favor of this because they resent the high-powered employees who get a lot of money. At the very end, they also get a lot more. So I think that when you take a look at your regular, hardworking city employee, they're not going to really object to this at all.
Councilor Jameson.
Well, I was just trying to add to the discussion that I think this amendment actually gets about to the heart of the matter, and that the Board of Trustees didn't recommend this as a part of their package because I don't think they thought it would fly either. And I think our approach here, and this is where I've been struggling back and forth, is that we've really got to do this together. I think the item number 22 that's in front of us is I should refer to as a large step. And I think we'll leave half the group in this process and they will not come along and we will stagnate right here. And I think the attempt from these boards of trustees was to come up with something that was palatable to the whole group, and perhaps we could get halfway down a step together. And I'm just concerned if we try to take this full step that we'll lose it. And so I've struggled back and forth with the recommendations that the boards of trustees have offered. Certainly have done their due diligence far more than we have in this process, and I think they get it, and that's why they didn't include that, because it makes sense to a lot of us that be included, but they should know their employees, they should know the group.
Councilor Jameson, if I could follow up, you're absolutely right. I think that's what the board, and Angeline's welcome to come up, I think that's what the board would say, is that they package that in a manner that they thought would represent the best opportunity to achieve the results relating to those proposals.
Right, and so if I could, as long as we're actually just in closed discussion here, right, so I've got to agree with Councilor Karski that this pushes us over the top. And then as well, I'll be voting against this item so that perhaps we have a chance to take a half a step together instead of risking it all with a full step. So I just thought I'd share that as a discussion. Thank you.
There's been some very, very good discussion on this amendment that has been proposed by Councilor Staggers. And with that in mind, with the permission of this body, I'd like to take a roll call vote, please. A roll call vote on the amendment only. Thank you.
Councilor Erpenbach.
No.
Entenmann. Pardon me, Jameson.
No.
Karski.
No.
Rolfing.
No.
Staggers.
Yes.
Aguilar.
No.
Anderson.
Yes.
Entenmann.
No.
The amendment proposed failed 2-6. We're now back to the main motion. Is there any further discussion on this? Councilor Staggers.
Yeah. One of the issues that has not really been brought up tonight is the issue of risk. Right now, the current retirement plan that we have, there is no risk at all assumed by the employees. All the risk is assumed by the City of Sioux Falls or the taxpayers of Sioux Falls. Now, when you look at pension plans today, you just don't see that existing in the world anymore. What is the world like today in 2012? The world is defined contributions. And with defined contributions, what do you have? You have the employee taking all the risk. What we have before us now with this item number 22 is, well, it's a compromise. And it's a compromise that nobody really likes that well, but it is a compromise. But the one thing about this compromise is that we have risk now being shared by the employees, the future employees. And also we have risk by the state of South Dakota or South Dakota taxpayers. So even though many of us really don't like this compromise all that much, I guess I will be voting for this with, once again, reservations about a lot of free potential money coming from the $40 per month per year service. And also, well, because of this amendment we just defeated, but it's a compromise, and I'll be voting for it.
Councilor Stagers, thank you. With that in mind, I would like to ask for a roll call vote on item number 22.
Councilors Erpenbach,
Yes.
Jameson,
No.
Karski,
Yes.
Rolfing,
Yes.
Staggers,
Yes.
Aguilar,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 23, is that right, Mr. Fifley? Okay. Item number 23.
Mr. Mayor, oh, sorry.
We'll just read it in the record. Thank you.
Deferred for a meeting of June 19th, 2012, a resolution providing recommendations and support for pension plan changes for City of Sioux Falls employees, Employees Retirement System Board of Trustees, and Firefighters Pension Fund Board of Trustees recommendation.
Councilor Erpenbach.
Mr. Mayor, I would move that this item be removed from the agenda.
Second, Entman.
Thank you. With that in mind, could I have a roll call vote, please?
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
Thank you. That's passed 8-0. Item 20. Oh, yes. Would you like to take a break, Councilor Erpenbach?
Love to take a
Very
break.
good. I don't blame you. Let's reconvene at 9:45. 9:45, that gives 5 minutes. At 9:45, I will be calling this meeting back to order. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. These people still have it compared to the rest of the world.
Oh, I agree.
Yeah.
I think they all.
How many of us in here have defined benefits in the council? I wonder how many of us have defined benefits in the council. The mayor would have to invest it. Anybody, and also the city clerk. Anybody else with defined benefits on the council?
You won't. The mayor will be vested.
He will after 8 years. He stays for 8, he'll be vested. Yeah. I think Johnson's getting about, what, 1800 or something like that. Yeah, he is. I think you have to be in more than 4 years or 8 years, something like that. He is vested, though, definitely.
So are you vested?
Oh, yeah, sure. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I'm going to clean up. I'm going to spike my
Well, thanks, everybody. I'd like to welcome all the viewers back to the meeting. We are going to reconvene this City Council meeting. We are on item number 24.
A resolution vacating the public right-of-way on alley from south right-of-way line of West 13th Street to north right-of-way line on West 14th Street in Block 2, Grigsby Addition.
Good evening, Chad Heavey with the Engineering Division of Public Works. This unimproved right-of-way is the alley just west of Minnesota Avenue between 13th Street and 14th Street. The petition was initiated by Eric Willardson. A utility easement will be maintained. If vacated, the land will be used in the redevelopment of the entire block. The petitioner is present tonight to answer any of your questions, and staff recommends approval.
Is there anyone in the audience who wanted to speak to this item? Council?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Karski.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve item 24, seconded by Councilor Karski. If there is no discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach? Yes. Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 25.
A resolution vacating the public right-of-way on West National Guard Drive from North Minnesota Avenue to 2,961.85 feet west as shown on attached exhibit.
This improved right-of-way is on the north end of the airport, west of Minnesota Avenue. The petition was initiated by Dan Letelier, the Executive Director of the Sioux Falls Regional Airport. A utility and access easement will be maintained. The right-of-way vacation will allow the street to be changed from a public street to a private street, which will allow greater flexibility for Maverick Air Center to transfer fuel from their fuel farm to the new West Side General Aviation Ramp. I do not know if the petitioner is here tonight to answer any of your questions, but staff does recommend approval.
Thanks, Chad. Is there anyone who wanted to speak to this item? Council?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve, seconded by Councilor Rolfing.
Second, Rolfing.
Very good. Councilor Rolfing, question.
Chad, how can you explain how this gives better access to?
I believe the requirements to convey or haul fuel are different on a public street versus a private street.
Okay.
Council, roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 26.
A resolution vacating the public right-of-way on North Lewis Avenue from North Lewis Avenue to East 50th Street North, as shown on Exhibit A.
This unimproved right-of-way is just north of the Benson Road and Lewis Avenue intersection. The petition was initiated by Randy Thompson. A utility easement will be maintained. If vacated, the land may be used to redevelop the property, and staff recommends approval.
Anyone want to speak to this item? Council.
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve this item, seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. There is no further discussion. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. 26. 27.
Item 27, a resolution vacating the public right-of-way on alley adjacent to lots 1 through 7 and lots 16 through 22, Block 5, Tower Park Addition.
This unimproved right-of-way is northeast of the intersection of Cleveland Avenue and 6th Street. The petition was initiated by David Gibbon. A utility easement will not be maintained. If vacated, the land will be used for residential lots, and staff recommends approval.
Any discussion from the audience? Council?
Move to approve, Entman.
Second, Anderson.
Councilor Entman has been a motion to approve 27, seconded by Councilor Anderson Jr. If there is no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0. Item 28.
A resolution vacating the public right-of-way on East 4th Street from North Harrington Avenue to North Sherwood Avenue, except for 12 feet for alley right-of-way.
This unimproved right-of-way is also northeast intersection of Cleveland Avenue and 6th Street. The petition was submitted by David Gibbon. A utility easement will not be maintained. If vacated, the land will be used for residential lots, and staff recommends approval.
Would anybody like to speak to this item? City Council?
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Jameson.
Councilor Anderson Jr. has made a motion to approve. It was seconded by Councilor Jameson. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
That has passed 8-0. Item 29.
A resolution vacating the public right-of-way on North F Avenue from West Algonquin Street to West Blackhawk Street.
This improved right-of-way is south of the airport and west of Minnesota Avenue. The petition was initiated by Doug Birkland with Sayer and Associates for Raven Industries. A utility easement will not be maintained. If vacated, the land will be used for future development. A neighborhood meeting was held on June 29th. And before I take you through comments, I do have to pull up another exhibit that has a lot of information on it. All right, this is a very busy map, and I'm not going to take you through everything on here, but there are some key points I want to point out that I'll be talking about tonight. The road on the very north end that runs, I'll just say east and west, is Algonquin Street. The street that is just south of there is Blackhawk. And then if you go all the way over to the west, Industrial Avenue runs north and south.
Chad, I'm sorry, or Heath, do you have the pointer on that thing? That's okay. There you go. You had it. No, that's okay. Well, we'll do our best. Heath, good job. Keep that going, and we'll do our best to show the public what we're talking about here. Chad, keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I was, like I said, we have an Industrial Avenue, and then to the east of that is F Avenue, and the little piece highlighted on the north is the section we're talking about tonight. Like I said, there's a lot of information on this map, and we will reference it if we have to. But I just wanted you to know it's there, and I'm going to be talking now from that. So, like I stated, our first public meeting was on June 29th, and the meeting was attended by representatives, of course, from Ravens and their engineer and their contractor, but also then some local businesses. Creative Surfaces, which is just south of the section of F Avenue, and also they're farther down on Industrial. Building Products Incorporated, which is a large parcel there. And then Jefferson Bus Lines, which is just south of there. And I do want to say I have to thank those businesses for coming to these meetings they provided us a tremendous amount of information on what goes on up there every day as far as traffic. And so we've had a very good discussion, and we're going to make some changes up there no matter what the outcome is tonight. But we had a great dialogue, and we really appreciated that. So concerns raised during the meeting. Number one, it is difficult to make a left turn onto Minnesota, either from Algonquin Street or Blackhawk Street. The parking of trucks near intersections obstructs drivers' views and is a safety concern, and that's many of the intersections in this area. The intersection of Blackhawk Street and Minnesota Avenue should be restriped to improve efficiency. What happens there is if you have trucks that want to make a left-hand turn onto Minnesota, they kind of, I'll just say, take up a couple lanes, so then the people that want to make a right don't have anywhere to go, and then they're delayed by that. Other questions are, where will the 150 to 200 trucks that use this section of F Avenue go if it is closed? There is train tracks in this area, and there is businesses up there that receive freight by rail and product. So today you do have delays caused by trains, and you will in the future. And then by closing this road, the trucks will have to make additional turns, which they had concerns about that being a liability. And finally, this is a very unique area. It already is difficult for trucks to find their destinations in this area, and by closing this street, they feel it will make it even more difficult to get their trucks in and out. So we took what we heard at the June 28th meeting, and we went out last week and did additional tube counts, which tells us the volumes on the streets, and then we did intersection counts at Minnesota and Algonquin, and then at Minnesota and Blackhawk. Because there has been some business expansion in that area, and we did see some increase in numbers. So I think it was a good suggestion that they offered, and we followed up on. So we came back to them yesterday on July 9th, presented that information. Based on the current traffic volumes, a traffic signal is warranted at the intersection of Minnesota Avenue and Algonquin. We are currently evaluating when we could potentially install the signal there. We will also remove parking at some of the key intersections that I talked about and restripe the intersection of Blackhawk and Minnesota Avenue. This will improve the safety of those intersections and also the efficiency. The vacation of F Avenue will put additional traffic on Industrial Avenue, Algonquin Street, and other streets in the area, which is a concern to the businesses who attended the meeting. However, typically the streets in this area are approximately 10 feet wider than a typical collector street throughout the city, and they can accommodate on-street parking and the additional traffic volumes that will be placed on them if F Avenue is closed. If F Avenue is vacated, there will be a change in traffic patterns in this area. But I do believe the improvements mentioned above, combined with the street widths, will accommodate the traffic, and we will be improving access onto Minnesota Avenue. The petitioner is present. Well, let me back up. Hugh from Ravens is sick tonight, but there are representatives here from their engineer and their contractor, and I know there are also representatives from the local businesses here tonight that want to share your concerns, but staff does recommend approval.
Well, very good. I want to thank those folks who stayed around this late, but if anybody wants to speak to the council, please come forward. We'd certainly appreciate hearing from you. Welcome.
Mayor, members of the council, for the record, my name is Meredith Larson, and I'm here tonight pinch hitting for Hugh Dotson. Chad mentioned Hugh's under the weather. So I'll do the best I can to represent Hugh, who's the corporate facilities manager for Raven. I know Hugh would want to thank Chad and his staff for all the work that they've done to not only look at Avenue F, but all of this area as a whole from a 10,000-foot level instead of from Algonquin just to Blackhawk. The photo that's on the screen is old, because if you've been up there lately, you'll know that late last year, Raven completed the construction of an 80,000 square foot facility for Applied Technology Division. And this summer, just a little while ago, finished about a 30,000 square foot expansion of their engineered films. And I think most of you know I'm with Henry Carlson Company, and we're getting ready to start another extrusion tower for engineered films that will fill up all of the land that's available on the east side of Avenue F. And that leaves just that parcel on the west side. And Raven's master plan is such that in the very near future, they want to double the size of Applied Technology because of the phenomenal growth they've experienced since opening that new plant last fall. And in the near future, we'll also want to, if Avenue F is closed, continue the engineered film division, the extrusion towers that you see out there that manufacture the film, to the west. And so it's very important to Raven to continue to grow per their master plan. And they would appreciate your favorable consideration this evening. Are there any questions?
Councilor Snagers?
Yes, Meredith, I guess my question is, do we have any guarantee that Raven will actually expand?
Yes. I think that if he was here tonight, he would tell you that they've already run out of space at ATD. The 80,000 square foot facility has been maxed out, which is a wonderful thing in such a short amount of time. Architectural plans are being developed now for an 80,000 foot expansion of that building on the east end of the existing building. And as I mentioned, we have been asked to work with an architectural firm and engineers to prepare the plans to build another extrusion tower that will fit on the south side of the warehouse that we just finished. And I know that Raven, per their master plan and the growth in that division, will need to jump the street and start building again more warehouse and extrusion towers for engineered films.
Is this in 2 or 3 years?
When we started the expansion of ATD, the plan was to try to have that complete by February, March next year. And we're looking at a similar schedule for the extrusion towers starting this fall.
Thank you.
Councilor Karski.
I was at some of the meetings, so I know the answer to a lot of these questions, but just as a matter of record, I'm going to ask them, what kind of impact would that make on employment for Raven? How many employees would they be adding?
I couldn't tell you, Councilor Karski, exactly how many. The 80,000 square foot ATD facility that was opened late last year employs, I believe, around 225 people. I would imagine by doubling that, there'd probably be a similar amount of employees added. The extrusion towers obviously are dramatically different. That's more equipment and warehouse space for the product that they manufacture. So The ATD piece adds, I believe, quite a few more people because of what they do. The engineered film division doesn't, because that's more machine-driven. Does that answer your question?
Meredith, thank you very much for sticking around and representing Raven tonight and answering these questions. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You bet. Is there anybody else who, please come forward. Welcome.
My name is Brad Brown. I'm here on behalf of Creative Surfaces. We are the business directly south of the area that they're talking about there. We appreciate Raven's need and want to continue to expand and continue to be more efficient, but we have the same needs for our business as well. And this doesn't help that. We are a company of probably 100 employees, the most in that facility directly south there. We do commercial stuff locally. We do commercial stuff internationally, as well as signage that we send internationally. So we probably have 6 to 10 trucks every day bringing materials to us, 18-wheel trucks, express deliveries, things like that. We also have probably 6 to 8 trucks going out every afternoon. Same thing, express trucks, semis, that type of traffic. We're different than some other businesses in that area in that we are all of our traffic is between 7 in the morning and 5 in the afternoon. It's not like our truck traffic is after hours when the streets are not as busy. As Chad said, they went out and they did some studies and they saw increased traffic out there, and that was during a 4th of July weekend when the traffic was down from what it would typically be on normal business days. So there is increased traffic out there. That road does get used. We appreciate, one of their ideas is to add a light on the corner of Minnesota and Algonquin, which is needed and warranted, but it becomes much, much more difficult to get there by closing F Avenue. Right now, we've got a straight shot to Algonquin, and we hang a right, and we can be on Minnesota Avenue, where now we'll have to take 2 or 3 more turns, and they're not easy turns. One of them's, as he said, there's people parking in the streets, so the streets are wider, but many times there's people parked in those streets, so even though they're wider, it's more of a safety concern. There's a left turn that's blinded by a business that's very close to the street. And also right before you get to Minnesota Avenue, there's a right turn that you've only got probably 30 or 40, 50 feet before you're at Minnesota Avenue. So by adding that light, you're going to be adding more traffic on Algonquin waiting to get onto Minnesota. Well, that's right where we're trying to get on to Algonquin to get onto the street, so it'll become more of a challenge. The only other option to get to industrial is to go over around Ravens, and as you can see, that corner is not a simple corner to get around there. It's less than even a 9-degree turn for trucks to be able to make that turn. So in addition to making more turns, that if we go that route rather than going over to A Avenue, which is the only other option, it just becomes more of a challenge. So like I say, we do appreciate that they want to be more efficient, but it's certainly not making our business more efficient. So we would challenge them to continue to look for other options. Can they go over the street? Can they go under the street? Is there any way we can accommodate them and also accommodate our traffic and be able to maintain access on F Avenue? As Chad said, that area is a challenge in general because there's really only 2 ways out to the north, Algonquin and Blackhawk, and there's only 2 ways out to the south, and Russell is the main one, which I know there's going to be lots of upcoming changes as the event center comes into play. Russell will be coming under many more changes, which will continue to direct more and more traffic to the north, and probably not going towards Russell. So those would be my comments. I appreciate your time.
Brian, thank you. Council, anybody have any questions of Mr. Brown before he leaves? Mr. Brown, thank you for staying tonight. We do appreciate it. Anybody else? Welcome.
Good evening. I'm Chris Fisher. I'm here on behalf of Building Products. That's the BPI you see circled right now. Currently, well, first of all, I want to talk about the tube counts that Chad talked about. Those were taken last week during the holiday week. This is an industrial park, so I'm disputing some of the numbers on the tube counts. Most of us were either, well, certainly closed on Wednesday, and a lot of them were running half staff on Monday and Tuesday, and the other half staff on Thursday and Friday. But irregardless of that, For us, our truck gate, our truck entrance and exit is on the back side of that facility on Delaware and F Avenue, right where the little hand is, the pointer is right now. When our trucks are going out and we're a building material distributor, we distribute building materials to lumber yards. We're going out east, we're going down F and out north. When we're going, and we have 30 trucks going out every morning this time of the year. And then the balance of them are going out to the west, out on Industrial Avenue, and then catching Russell and going out on the interstate. At any rate, all of them are going out early, so we don't have a real problem with the early departures. But where we're going to run into trouble is on the returns. And we're returning all those trailers or all those trucks somewhere between 4:30 and 6 o'clock. And they're all coming from the north because we fuel up on North Cliff. So all of them are coming down. We come down Minnesota, turn now at the light, come down F Avenue. In thinking about our 30 outbound trucks and inbound trucks that are coming, we also have our inbound freight, which is coming in on a daily basis from all of our manufacturers that we're representing. So, and those guys are coming in and leaving also. So Heath mentioned that there'll probably be an additional 150 more trucks compared to the counts that are available, or for the numbers that are available now, if I heard him right. So the other thing that I'm concerned about is in the future, you guys are going through a major construction on Russell Avenue. Looking way ahead, that's going to put more pressure on Industrial Avenue, and I think it's going to cripple that whole traffic pattern that we've got going there. So we want to be good neighbors, but we also want to make the wisest decision here when it comes to the traffic.
Ms. Fisher, thank you. Council, any questions, Ms. Fisher? Ms. Fisher, thanks so much for being here tonight. We appreciate it.
Okay.
Well, great job. Thank you very much for sticking around. It's 10 past 10, and you folks were kind enough to stay. We appreciate it. Council, I'm now going to hand it off to you. Councilor Jameson.
Councilor, a question for Chad. Chad, review with us the policy for vacation. Is, I guess maybe more directly, if both adjoining property owners on each side choose to vacate, does the city have the authority to deny that?
If the petition is filled out by 100% of the adjoining property owners, it is considered a valid petition. Whether I think it's a good idea or not, it's my responsibility to bring it to you guys because it is a valid petition. So every time I bring a right-of-way vacation petition to this body, it is signed off by 100% of the adjoining property owners.
Right, and I guess the idea is that until we change that policy on our end, they will always generally be approved because otherwise we would be going against our own policy of making it a valid application.
And our policy is based on state law.
Well, okay, well, the other question is the traffic counts. I'm frustrated that the other business owners here are going to be causing a change to their cycles and even probably challenges. The traffic counts that were done, there's some objections. Perhaps you did it at a time when business wasn't really operating at its full peak capacity. If you found, or if you had the time to do another study, how hard would that be? And how close are you to making some of these these changes?
I certainly agree that the volumes are more than likely low.
Okay.
But I don't agree that I don't feel that they're 50% low. I don't think traffic is going to double from what we've seen. I think the numbers, if we counted them this week or next week, would go up somewhat. Maybe in that span we missed 250 to 400 vehicles that day. However, the volumes on these roads are very low compared to the capacity they have. We have local streets or collector streets right now that can carry 6,000 to 8,000 vehicles a day, and they are much narrower than these roads are. So And then was your second question, how close are we to making some of these improvements I mentioned?
Right.
All right. The restriping at Blackhawk in Minnesota can probably happen within the next 2 to 4 weeks. Regarding the signal at Algonquin, we are looking at if we have the, I'll say, equipment already in-house. It'd be equipment that's been left over from previous jobs, and that's what we're doing right now, is to see if, do we have the equipment on hand that we could go out and get the signal installed in the next 90 days. If we don't, there is a lead time to get this equipment, and that could push it off maybe into 13. So, but that's why we're just looking at what we have, and we haven't made a commitment either way as to when we can do it, because we need to look at the inventory and also figure out what it'll take to get a signal installed there. Removing the parking, whether we pull it back from an intersection 50 feet or 75 feet is just a matter of putting up some signs, so that could happen in the next couple weeks. I also will mention they talked about the curve or the turn there at Industrial and at Algonquin. We have looked at that. We can soften that radius. It's a very minor project. So we have, we went into this, we brought this to the group last year, and Ravens pulled it back because they weren't ready to proceed with the development until now. But we had talked about them previously that we would need additional right-of-way to kind of soften that curve. So that certainly is something that can be done in short order if needed.
Councilor Inman.
Chad, we do know that Russell's going to be reconstructed. And when is this on Russell?
It'll be in 13 and 14.
Okay, we do have the two avenues that come onto Russell Avenue. How it was brought up, the traffic and the control of that traffic in that area, how will we address that?
Well, yes, there will be, when Russell's reconstructed, it'll be reconstructed in several phases, and we'll always have traffic. It'll always be open to traffic. Now, granted, it's going to be probably reduced to a lane in each direction, but they still will have access at Western Avenue at all times. There will be access over here at Prairie. The access at West Avenue, that access to the frontage road will go away once construction is done. That access point will be shifted to the east, and it'll be a right in, right out. But we will have to work very closely with our signal timings and our construction crews to make sure that we can reasonably accommodate traffic during the construction. However, it carries a lot of traffic. There is going to be some delay. That's just part of the business, but we're going to all have to work together to try to address all these situations that come up.
Council, very good discussion. Thank you. Oh, okay. Councilor Kurski.
I had one question, Chad. Avenue F on the north end dead ends at, I don't know if it's an existing guard gate, old former gate to the National Guard out there. And I've heard different things. Have we had any contact? Have they voiced any concerns over this?
I haven't spoken with them directly. I have just heard, though, in the past, and it's not just with F Avenue. H Avenue to the west was also vacated, a portion of that. They have been in support of these because it eliminates a potential hazard or a threat by somebody, having a straight run at their complex with, if somebody was going to do some harm or something like that. So they haven't come right out and visited with us, but I have. That's kind of a theme I've heard from others as we've done work up here.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.
Chad, what's the, is there any difference of the width between Alican and Blackhawk?
I don't believe so.
But do we allow parking on Alican? Just on one side, I believe, or is it on both sides of the street?
I think it's on the south side.
Okay, and on Blackhawk, we allow it on,
Both sides.
it is both sides, on both streets? Okay. How many, with the development of that section, how many streets have we vacated so far? Because I do remember the council vacating a street here just a couple years ago.
Yeah, and I apologize. I did have a map. But you're correct. We have vacated several streets in this area, and it's very similar. You know, we vacated a lot of streets downtown as things have redeveloped. I'll see if I have this map up here, but.
And then to continue, if you would.
Oh, please.
Have we spoken to the fire department about this too? Because as we continue to vacate these streets, we're sort of making it more difficult to get to the core of that whole industrial park. Have we gotten any replies from the police or fire, how they're going to get in there with their fire trucks?
The fire department reviews every vacation. They're part of the review team, and they didn't have any concerns with this.
Okay. I guess, you know, looking at this, though, we only have 2 streets now in that section that go north-south through that whole development now. And this is the only one that's straight through. The other one has that curve on it and everything. And I just, okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad.
If
please.
I could, I just wanted to, when the construction of Russell is complete, there will be 3 lanes in each direction. So it will be a larger facility than it is today.
Council, very good. Do we have a motion? We don't. Okay, thank you. Would anybody consider making a motion on this item?
Move to approve, Karski.
Second, Erpenbach.
Councilor Karski's made a motion to approve, and it was seconded by Councilor Erpenbach. If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote, please. Yes, Councilor Anderson Jr.
I'd just like to state this is an area that I grew up around. And when I used to run a long time ago, I used to run through this area a lot. And there's been a lot of changes to that over the years. And I believe that, you know, I'm all for Ravens expanding and creating new jobs, but at what cost to the neighboring businesses? They've given up other streets in the past, and it looks like that it's not going to stop, and that the access to those businesses in the core of this are going to suffer due to the fact that it's going to be more difficult to get in and out of that entire section. I will not be supporting this.
Very good. Councilor Rolfing?
I somewhat agree with Councilor Anderson, but I would urge Chad to keep an eye on this territory or this area very, very closely now, and maybe do a study as to where we really need to look at the streets and how we can improve the traffic flow in this area, because with the event center coming in there, that's going to become fairly desirable territory or ground, and we need to make sure that it continues to be that way. And if we keep chopping it up too much, it's not going to be that way.
Councilor Karski.
I sat in on the last 2 meetings on the street vacation, and there was a lot of good input. The first meeting, there was a lot of concern about just traffic patterns in general in this area. And I kind of pushed to have the study done a little bit earlier, even though it probably would have been better waiting till later in July when we had a full week instead of doing it over holiday week. But Ravens is, from what I can see and understand, wanting to move on this, and I didn't feel right about postponing any action on this. This will cause an inconvenience to some of the businesses in the neighborhood, in that they would have to make 1 or 2 more turns to get to the main streets. But these are wide streets, and I'm talking very wide streets by our standards. And it is an industrial area. It's not a residential area. There is plenty of room for what we're going to, for the street vacation to happen. And I'm going to, it's in my district, and I looked hard at this, and I think it is the right thing to do, and I'm going to encourage you to vote for it.
Very good. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Anderson.
No.
Intamin.
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 30.
A resolution including certain contiguous territory within the corporate limits of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, annexation 2012-05-01, 85th Street and I-29, Lemmy.
Mike Cooper, Planning and Building Services. I sent an email out late this afternoon indicating that we would like to request a deferral of this to the August 7th council meeting. On behalf of the applicant and the petitioner, they would like some more time to work on this, including some additional notification of surrounding property owners.
Mr. Cooper, did you have a date you wanted that?
August 7th?
August 7th.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Councilor Jameson.
I'll make a motion to defer to August 7th.
Second, Anderson.
Thank you, Councilor Jameson. Thank you, Councilor Anderson, Jr. If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
Yes.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Intamin.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 31.
A resolution declaring it necessary to levy and levying a special front foot assessment fee for street maintenance and repair.
Good evening again, Mayor and City Council. This is a procedural step to levy the front foot assessment per ordinance. We are not asking for a fee increase. The front foot assessment would stay at $1 per front foot. Thank you.
Would anybody like to speak to this item? Councilor Staggers.
Just a quick question. How long has this tax been around, Mark?
I will have to check on that, but I want to say it was in the early 80s
Oh, okay.
that it was enacted.
Okay, thank you.
Move for approval, Anderson.
Second, Aguilar.
Councilor Anderson, Jr. has made a motion to approve this item, seconded by Councilor Aguilar. If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach.
Yes.
Jameson.
Yes.
Karski.
Yes.
Rolfing.
Yes.
Staggers.
No.
Aguilar.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Intamin.
Yes.
That is passed 7-1. Item 32.
Good evening, Andy Berg with Public Works.
1 second, Andy, please.
Sorry.
Sorry. Resolution abating storm drainage fee assessments at parcel number 76669.
Sorry, Andy Berg with Public Works. Tonight we've got four resolutions, and most of them regarding drainage fees. Just a quick overview: drainage fees are charged to all property within the city for funding of the operation, maintenance, and capital expenses for the storm sewer and drainage systems. They're based on your lot area, your land use, and a unit finance charge. The land use is based on a generic single family gets the same runoff weighting factor for all of the properties within the city that meet the single family requirement, all the way up to commercial properties such as the mall that have an 18 multiplier on it. So those are what are used in the calculation of the drainage fees. The first item tonight is Eastside Baptist Church property. They have a church land use, which assigns 11.25 runoff weighting factor to it. Our ordinance allows them to ask for a detailed site study to determine the actual impervious surface on their property and determine a runoff weighting factor based on that. Their runoff weighting factor went from an 11.25 down to a 5.8 because of the large amount of green space, as you can see on the exhibit. We support this reduction in their drainage fee. It reduces the fee from $6,753 down to $3,481.
Councilors, anybody? Would anybody like to speak to this item? Very good. Council?
Move to approve, Erpenbach.
Councilor Urbanbach's going to motion to approve this item, seconded by Councilor Anderson, Jr. Any comments? Roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 33.
A resolution abating and refunding front foot assessments for street maintenance fees at parcel number 57650.
The resident at this location has a parcel that has 70 linear feet of front footage on East 5th Street. This is an unimproved right-of-way. They were charged a frontage fee of $70 for the 70 front foot of frontage that they have on that. We do not typically charge for unimproved right-of-way. This was an error on the charge, so we support the waiving of that front fee and the refund of the first half of their payment of the $35.
Councilor Staggers.
Yeah, I'm going to be voting in favor of reducing this frontage tax.
Great job. Councilor Erpenbach.
Then, Andy, if whatever we end up doing now, will they continue to get billed, or do we make this go away for good until it's?
It's intended to, when we change it in the system, it should remain at 0. However, if the right-of-way is improved, we would change that back to be billing for
Good.
that.
Thank you, Andy.
Anybody like to make a motion to approve this?
So moved.
Councilor Edmund, thank you. And Councilor Anderson Jr., thanks for seconding it. If there's no further discussion, a roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jamison?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entman.
Yes.
That has been approved 8-0. Item 34.
A resolution abating and refunding storm drainage fee assessments at parcel number 11652.
Item number 34 and number 35 are both in reference to the same property. Mr. Soward is here tonight to speak to this. His property has a drainage fee associated with it. He is asking in this first resolution to have that drainage fee waived for his property. If that resolution does not pass, there's a second resolution correcting the amount of square footage billed to Mr. Soward's property, since a portion of that property is located within the floodway. So to address the first resolution, Mr. Soward's property, as you can see on the map here, is a property adjacent to the Skunk Creek River, just north of 12th Street on La Mesa Drive. His property is 73,000 square feet. It has a portion in the floodway. 48,000 is still billable outside the floodway. He does not feel that any city drainage passes through his property, that his property is needing any city drainage. So he doesn't feel that he should be paying that fee. He was not charged in prior years. I believe this was due to the floodway impacts to that property. However, per the ordinance, this property should be charged for the portion of that property that is outside of the floodway. And as I stated before, every property in town is charged regardless of how their site drains, because we use those funds to maintain the drainage systems surrounding all of these properties within the city for cleanup and repairs to issues on Skunk Creek, for the streets in this neighborhood and elsewhere.
Mr. Seward, welcome. Thanks so much for waiting all this time, and please take your time. Thanks for staying.
The property consists of 1 2/3 acres, and the northern portion of the lot is developed with 2 garages, 2 driveways, and a house. And all of that drainage goes downhill to the lower portion of my property, and actually is absorbed in the ground rather than even flowing to Skunk Creek. The only water that has anything to do with city drainage is where the culvert comes underneath of La Mesa Drive by 9th Street and drains on my property. And in the spring of the year, after we've had the winter collection of McDonald's wrappers and beer cans and the likes of that in the ditches, why that comes through the culvert and onto my property, which I clean up, just one of the things in the spring. But that's the only part of my property that has anything to do with the drainage fees of the City of Sioux Falls. So I don't feel there should be any charge to me for the drainage because city has nothing to do with it. And I actually maintain part of the city's trash system by cleaning up out of the culvert.
Seward, thank you. Council, anybody have any questions of Mr. Seward? Thank you very much, sir. Council? Councilor Karski?
Question for Andy, if I may. The portion that's in yellow on our map on North La Mesa Drive, is that curb and gutter?
No.
It's not. Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Anderson, Jr.?
Andy, taking a look at this acreage again, too, and its proximity to the river, anything south of what he has developed now isn't going to be able to be developed due to flood concerns?
I believe a majority of that property, yeah, just south of his driveway and his parking pad there are all within the floodway, which requires an extensive modeling and a lot of effort with FEMA before you could possibly build in that area.
Would it be more workable if we only charged him drainage fees for the property that he has developed there?
That's what the second resolution proposes. If we don't waive the fees with this first resolution, that we remove the entire portion covered by the floodway and only charge him for the portion of the square footage that is out of the floodway that could be built upon further.
Okay.
Councilor Karski?
Thank you.
And the difference in those fees is, from the way I'm reading it, going from $155 down to $102, is that correct?
Correct. If you remove the floodway from that charge, it reduces it roughly $53 down to $102.
Okay, thank you.
Council, can I get a motion on item number 34?
Move to approve, Erpenbach.
Second, Aguilar.
There is a motion to approve item number 34, and it has been seconded. I'm just going to ask, just so that we are clear as a voting body, this not this time, all times, I'm sorry, would, Andy, if the council votes yes on item 34, what are they voting yes to do?
If they vote yes on item number 34, they are saying they wish to have Mr. Seward's drainage fees removed from his taxes. Entirely. 35 would remove just the floodway portion.
And so entirely would be, with your permission, council, entirely would be how much?
Entirely would be basically removing 102 for the year. 155 was charged, but technically it should be 102.
Okay. So we'd be, the council will be voting whether to remove $102 in fees to Mr. Seward.
Yes, and that's for this year, and then there would be a refund of what he's paid in the first half.
All right, council. Let's vote on that, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
No.
Jameson?
No.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
No.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intamin?
Yes.
That is passed 5-3. So we can now, do we have to read 35 into the record?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
35, a resolution abating storm drainage fee assessments at parcel number 11652.
Mr. Mayor,
Councilor Buck.
I'd move that we withdraw this item from the agenda.
Second, Aguilar.
There's been a motion to withdraw this item and seconded. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Intamin?
Yes.
That is passed 8-0. Item 36.
A resolution advising and giving consent to the appointment of members to certain citizen boards. May I read those board members, please?
Thank you very much.
Ryan Reckling, Board of Health, Falls Community Health Center Board. Preston Metler, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Steve Van Buskirk, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Myron Adam, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Phil Gunvaldson, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Mark Vellinga, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Mark Anderson, Infrastructure Review Advisory Board. Ellen Donahoe, Orpheum Theater Advisory Board of Directors.
Council, any comments, motions?
Move to approve, Erpenbach.
Second, Entenmann.
And a motion to approve, seconded by Councilor Entenmann. A roll call vote, please.
Councilors Erpenbach?
Yes.
Jameson?
Yes.
Karski?
Yes.
Rolfing?
Yes.
Staggers?
Yes.
Aguilar?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Entenmann?
Yes.
That has passed 8-0. Council, any new business we want to discuss?
Move to adjourn, Erpenbach.
Second, Karski.
There's been a motion to adjourn. It has been seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Make it a great night, Sioux Falls. Thank you, City Council. It is 10:40. You've had a full day. Thank you for your stewardship. Make it a great, great night.